Gentlemen, we are ready. All right, good evening, everybody. We'd like to call to order the Open Space Authority meeting for June 2025 to order. Call roll.
Director Kennett.
Here.
Director Matthews.
Here.
Director Chapman.
Here.
Director Sutherland. Here. Director Dominguez. Director Gill.
Here.
Okay, great. Very present. All right, the first item on the agenda, there's new staff introductions. And Nick Perry will be doing the honors. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, directors. Nick Perry, Long Range Planning Manager, Coyote Valley Project Director. My pleasure to be here tonight to introduce our new Coyote Valley Planning intern, Braden Will, or reintroduce for a few of you. Braden is a recent graduate of the University of California, Berkeley. He double majored in environmental economics and policy and ecosystem management and forestry from Cal. He was an open space aide here in 2023, so if he looks familiar to some of you, that's why. He will be helping us throughout the summer on the Coyote Valley Conservation Areas Master Plan with a special focus on studying opportunities for trails and public access on Spreckles Hill, right at the corner of Bailey and Santa Teresa in Coyote Valley. So I'll turn it over to Braden to introduce himself.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be back. I'm really excited to be coming back here in a very different capacity and kind of seeing things from a new lens from what I was doing at Field. I'd always loved working for the agency before, and I'm really excited to be back and to be contributing further to the mission of the organization as a whole. So thank you.
Welcome, Braden.
Thank you.
Okay. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons desiring to address the board on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 30 minutes. Have any public comment?
There are none.
Okay, great. All right, we'll now move on to the approval of May 22nd meeting minutes.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
All right.
I'm sorry. Director Gill, did you,
Second.
you second? Director Kennett moved?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Thank you. Director Kennett,
Yes.
Director Matthews,
Yes.
Director Chapman.
Yes.
Director Sutherland,
Yes.
Director Dominguez.
Yes.
Director Gill.
Yes.
Okay, so that motion passes unanimously. Okay. All right, the next item is the approval of consent item. Is there anybody wishing to pull any item off consent? And there actually only is one item on consent, so pretty self-explanatory. Unless anybody wants to pull it for discussion. Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Oh.
Okay. So moved. Yeah, gotcha. Matthews, Dominguez. Okay.
Okay, Director Kennett,
Yes.
Director Matthews,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Sutherland,
Yes.
Director Dominguez. Yes. Director Gill.
Yes.
Fabulous. Okay, that motion passes unanimously. All right. Now we are on new business. Okay, so we will be opening the staff presentation of the public hearing and approval of the engineer's report and levying the annual assessment for the open space acquisition and maintenance district number 1, renewal for fiscal year 2025-2026 first. Then we will take questions from the board and then open the public hearing. So Justina will be presenting.
Good evening, directors. Justina Team, Fiscal Services Officer. So annually, the board receives and approves the final engineer's report for the District 1 assessment, benefit assessment, and the engineer's report was compiled by SCI Consulting Group. Tonight, we actually have Jeanette Heinzen here on the line on Zoom to address any questions regarding the report. And the engineer's report does require the board to hold a public hearing and allow the public to comment on this item. And that's the end, and we could proceed to open a public hearing.
Okay, so
Thank
we'll
you.
formally open the public hearing. Do we have anyone wishing to address the board?
There are none.
All right, and we will formally close the public hearing. Thank you. I know. Hey, all right. All right, so now that we have closed the public hearing, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve. I'm sorry, let me read it. I will move to approve the engineer's report and the levying of the annual assessment for the open space acquisition and maintenance district number 1. Renewal for fiscal year 2025 through 2026.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second. I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion by Director Sutherland with a second by Director Kennett to adopt the to approve the engineer's report and levying the annual assessment for the open space acquisition and maintenance district number 1 for fiscal year 2025-2026.
Director Kennett,
Yes.
Director Matthews,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Sutherland. Yes. Director Dominguez. Yes. Director Gill.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Right. Now we will move on to the public hearing and presentation of the proposed fiscal year 2025-2026 budget, annual work plan, and position pay plan. Justina.
Yes, good evening again, directors. Oh, sorry, I'm tippy toeing. Thank you. Okay, Justina Teen, Fiscal Services Officer here, and tonight we're presenting the budget and annual work plan for fiscal year 25-26. And before we start, we'd like to provide a quick rundown of tonight's presentation. After this slide, I will be turning it over to our general manager for an introduction. And then the rest of the management and strategy team will present the work plan projects and programmatic priorities. We can opt to take a short break after the department presentations so that when we come back, we'll be a little bit more refreshed, can digest some numbers, and just review the budget. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andrea.
Thank you, Justine. Justina, good evening, directors. Thank you for advancing the slides.
Mhm.
Who's advancing slides? You are?
Yes.
Oh, thanks, Justina. Each year, staff seeks to present to the board a fiscally responsible budget based on what we expect to accomplish in the upcoming fiscal year with our projected revenues in order to implement the authority's mission on behalf of nature and people. You'll be hearing from departments in a moment about what priority projects and programs the Open Space Authority will be working on in the coming fiscal year. But first, I wanted to provide some context for those priorities and community investments that we're recommending to your board, and to underscore how the authority's modest revenue base remains essential to leveraging additional outside funding to increase the pace and scale of conservation, restoration, and stewardship of land and natural resources, as well as equitable access to nature across our 1,000 square mile jurisdiction. This slide that you see in front of you, some of you may have seen this before, but it shows that since passage of Measure Q in 2014, so a little over 10 years ago, we've almost doubled our acreage to 30,000 acres, and you can see the star there in the middle of the graph. We've significantly increased our responsibility for managing natural and agricultural lands for biodiversity, connectivity, ecosystem health, and agricultural viability, and to enhance climate resilience for built communities, and to provide nature-based solutions for increased frequency and extent of wildfires, floods, droughts, and extreme heat. Next slide. Since its establishment in 1993, the Open Space Authority has consistently demonstrated efficiency and transparency in managing public funds. As the board knows, we have been a pay-as-you-go agency, and unlike many government agencies, we have no accumulated debt. In recent years, we've taken a prudent approach and have made intentional balanced reductions to our budget without compromising the quality of public service. In fiscal year 25-26, staff is recommending a proposed total budget of $19,179,273, an increase of 2% from the current fiscal year budget. This minor increase is due to higher anticipated use of outside funding, approximately $1.54 million as compared to the current fiscal year where outside funding brought in 1.215. Despite the 12-month consumer price index trending above 2%, staff was able to keep our net use of Open Space Authority local tax revenues level, slightly increasing from 17,561 in fiscal year 24-25 to 17,636 in the proposed 25-26 budget, or less than 0.5%. And Justina will provide more details about the proposed budget later during this presentation. And in addition to being responsible with our local tax revenue, our agency has been able to efficiently leverage its combined modest and dedicated revenue streams to attract significant public and private funding from state, federal, and private sources to implement its mission. My next slide. So for instance, as we've charted here, just for illustrative purposes, the external funding that we both received and spent in the current fiscal year for land acquisitions alone, so this is all outside funding, exceeds $20 million and exceeds what we budgeted for the entire fiscal year of 24-25. I want to be clear that land acquisitions are opportunistic and therefore very difficult to plan or budget for. Also, we don't get this much external funding every year. This was really a banner year for acquisition grant funding. Nevertheless, it serves as an example of the impact of having a locally generated parcel tax funding from our local voters that we can leverage to bring in external funding. And we do not do our conservation work without the support from these crucial outside funders. To date, the authority has worked with partners to bring in more than $185 million of outside funding to leverage local tax dollars, which is about a 3-to-1, sometimes 4-to-1 match on key projects. These leverage funds, as you know, can only be spent on capital projects such as buying land, building facilities, that cannot be spent on managing and stewarding lands and natural resources to protect ecosystems, water resources, or reduce risk to public safety. The agency must cover these kinds of costs using our existing local tax revenues. That's why the Open Space Authority staff and the board's ad hoc committee on financial sustainability has been doing its feasibility work for some time now to explore placing a modest open space funding measure on the June 2026 ballot to enhance investment in conservation, restoration, stewardship, and land management. And as I've mentioned, the agency projects it will need additional revenue, and particularly operational revenue, beyond its current base revenues, both to maintain our current level of managing, stewarding, and caring for lands and waters, and preparing for additional conservation and land management responsibilities, where we will need to absorb these responsibilities on behalf of our public constituents. We continue to be humbled by the continued support and partnership of our communities and cities within our jurisdiction to ensure a sustainable and livable region for people and nature. And staff will continue to keep the board and the public updated on this on an ongoing basis. And so with that, I would like to advance to the next slide, and this is where we'll start our department presentations. Thank you.
Good evening, directors. Mark Landgraf unfortunately couldn't join us this evening, so these next couple of slides I'll be filling in for Mark Landgraf, Assistant General Manager. In order to set the stage for discussion of our work plan, Lee and I will introduce our respective divisions, giving brief overview of each division's responsibilities and how that relates to the departments therein. Then we'll pass the baton to our department managers to review the program areas within their departments and highlight the top priorities for this coming fiscal year. Can you go back a slide? I know there's a lot of information on this slide. This is a functional org chart of the agency. This is what we'll be talking through tonight, and just want to point out there's a paper copy of it in your meeting materials this evening. So we'd like to, what we really want to focus on this slide is to show that under the general manager, there are two divisions. There is the administrative and field operations division led by Lee Rauscher that you'll hear from in a moment, and the conservation planning and communications division led by Mark Landgraf, and all the departments within those two divisions. This is specifically zooming into the conservation planning and communications division. Presenting to you shortly will be the various departments managers. So that's Lucas Shellhammer, manager for planning, design, and construction, Nick Perry, long range planning manager and Coyote Valley project director, Megan Dreger, our conservation and strategic partnerships manager, and Megan, will be filling in for Charlotte Graham as well, who couldn't be here this evening, who leads our communication and media department. Next slide. Together as a division, we focus on the upfront conservation, prioritization, and strategizing, the land protection itself, and both short-term and long-range planning on the protected properties. Our division also performs the critical support functions for those activities, including bringing in external grant funding, doing the policy work, developing and maintaining external partnerships, and communicating with the public about our work on their behalf. Our division also works to connect people to nature through our popular urban grant program. Now turning it over to, I'm Megan Dreger, Conservation and Strategic Partnerships Manager. Our department, or CSP, which is of course easier to say, we're a team of 6 that cover a broad range of interrelated programs listed here, and I'll describe each of them at a high level. Conservation strategy, I'd say, is both an art and a science, and it sets the direction for all our work and where we focus. For example, which lands we need to acquire and what other tools we can use to protect land. Strategic partnerships is an umbrella term for all the outreach to partners and partner relationships that we work on. And our partners include everyone from big public agencies to small nonprofits and many, many others. Intergovernmental relations is all the work with elected officials, agencies, staff, and we're active at the local, regional, state, and federal levels. Examples of that work include potential changes to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, as well as commenting on recent proposed changes to the Endangered Species Act. Leveraged external funding is, of course, bringing in funds for our projects. Grant making is our grant programs, and that's the urban grant program, as well as our 20% funding grant program, both of which we fund other organizations' projects to connect people to nature. And easement acquisitions is buying land and easements over the land. Conservation easement stewardship is monitoring land where we have conservation easements to ensure that it's in good shape. And finally, land use analysis and policy includes everything from local zoning to reviewing development proposals and related policy issues that affect our conservation mission. So in one way or another, this department is connected to almost everything the authority does, either directly through buying land that we all work with, or more generally through funding, through support like finding funding and policy work that affects our work. Looking ahead to this year, some highlights for this department. As you probably know, we have an active solicitation right now for our urban grant program that we're very excited about. Jackie McBride leads this, and she says she's already seen a lot of interest. We're expecting a lot of good applications this round. Awards will be in March, more to come on that, and we'll send out materials well in advance. We're also working on several key land acquisitions, and we hope to have some exciting news to share with the board in this coming year, particularly for land acquisitions in Coyote Valley. And finally, we'll continue our ongoing efforts that we're always working on, things like policy work, continuing our work on partnerships, as well as bringing in funding. We're hopeful that we have some big funding announcements to share in the coming year as well.
My turn. Good evening, directors. Again, Nick Perry, Long Range Planning Manager. The Long Range Planning Department is me, Associate Planner Jen Peth, and Braden Will, who you just met tonight. So a small department, but we do some pretty exciting work. The department works closely with other departments, regional partners, community stakeholders, and the public to create comprehensive plans for the future of our Open Space Authority lands. And we do that primarily in three ways. We do strategic preserve planning for newly acquired lands. We manage our agency's planning work in Coyote Valley and the Coyote Valley Conservation Program. And we coordinate with other local agencies and nonprofits and partners on regional open space plans and regional trails and other projects. Next slide. So right now, as it has been for the past few years, the primary focus of this department or this function's work at OSA is the Coyote Valley Conservation Areas Master Plan, or CVCAM for short. We've got some exciting milestones coming up this fiscal year. In late 2025, I'm planning on coming back to the board with draft concept alternatives for habitat restoration, public access, and agriculture on the 1,500 acres of valley floor land that we protected in Coyote Valley. And then in spring, we're planning on sharing refined versions of those alternatives with the public through a series of workshops and public events and other outreach activities where we will get public feedback and get a sense of what people think about the plans that we've created. But we'll also start to look at different paths and alternatives for phasing those projects and permitting them. And this is all in service of creating a master plan for CVCAM in 2027. Our new consultant team, who we hired in April, has really hit the ground running. They're going full speed ahead. We're really excited to be working with them this year and working with our partners to achieve these milestones and sharing some pretty cool updates with you all later this year. And so with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Lucas.
Good evening, directors. Lucas Shellhammer, Planning, Design, and Construction Manager. Our department oversees projects that deliver functional, safe, and environmentally responsible preserved facilities and infrastructure, aligning with the authority's mission. Also manages and maintains the agency's Geographic Information System, or GIS systems, to support land management, agency-wide planning, and day-to-day operations. There's three different program areas within the department. The first is the capital planning program, which helps get the public access and facility projects off the ground. We assess what's possible, support early planning phases and design, and help shape the authority's long-term capital plan. This includes creating early studies to develop cost estimates, project phasing and feasibility, coordinating with field and natural resources on trails that balance access and conservation. And we help plan for the maintenance or replacement of key infrastructure for public access, grazing, and operations throughout our facilities. We also review outside development project proposals to protect the authority's interests. The second program area is the Design and Construction Program, which leads the design, delivery, and major construction projects, making sure projects meet OSA's goals, scope, schedules, and budgets. We manage the projects from the design and permitting to the bidding and through construction of projects, overseeing the contracts to keep them on budget, and ensuring we follow all building codes, permits, and environmental regulations. We also work with funding partners and a grants team to help pay for these capital projects. The last program area is the Cartography and Geographic Analysis Program, which provides maps and spatial analysis to support everything from our conservation planning to our community outreach. We maintain and support the authority's GIS tools and support the authority's GIS users, share spatial data and collaboration across OSA teams, as well as with our regional partners. We build tools for data collection and land management and decision-making, and create maps to visualize our projects, properties, and operations. Moving on to some of the highlights of the upcoming year. The first project I'd like to highlight is the Authority Atlas project. We'll be working collectively with field and natural operations teams to inventory infrastructure on the OSA lands. This project will help support our ongoing stewardship and operations planning, so we can plan for our long-term budgeting and management of our critical preserved infrastructure for public access, land management, agriculture and grazing, and fire management and response. The second project is the Rancho Cañada del Oro Regional Trail Planning Project, which is continuing from the last year. We'll continuing to assess alternatives and come up with a preferred trail alternative for that project, and begin work on the begin studies for the California Environmental Quality Act as well. The project's building on the momentum from last year's Yagas Creek Bridge and day use area opening and last month's Barrier Ridge Trail dedication, and continuing the partnerships with Barrier Ridge Trail and county parks to open 5 miles of new trail and double the amount of the preserve open to the public, and utilizing funding from Barrier Ridge Trail and Metropolitan Transportation Commission's Priority Conservation Area Grants Program. And last but not least, I'd like to highlight the Coyote Valley Open Space Preserve Public Access Project, which we'll be launching construction for next year. This will further OSA's vision for equitable access to nature. This includes providing accessible parking, trailheads, staging area, seating amenities, and interpretive use areas along the Heart's Delight Trail. The project, as many of you may recognize the pictures here, includes a space dedicated to recognizing the leaders whose accomplishments help protect Coyote Valley and other precious landscapes for the public to enjoy. These improvements aim to increase community engagement with nature and support the future integration into a larger regional trail network in the Coyote Valley area.
All right, good evening, directors. This time I'm representing Charlotte Graham, who couldn't be here this evening. And I'll be presenting about the Communications and Media Department. To start with, I want to define what is meant by these 6 programs listed here that are part of the department. Multimedia refers to the different digital and actually very little print channels by which we distribute information to the public. That includes social media, our website, newsletter, and more. Public relations, that program is having a consistent voice in our communications and responses to inquiries from the public. Earned media refers to news stories about our work that we don't have to pay for. Awareness building, we are constantly reaching out and engaging new constituents to build awareness about the importance of nature and the authorities' work. In addition to having a consistent voice, we make sure our brand is used consistently, appropriately, and respectfully, and that includes the authorities' logo, artwork, and the look and feel of our social media posts. And lastly, this department is also responsible for coordinating emergency or other public safety communications, such as trail or preserve closures. Bringing all those together, the communication team plays a critical role in helping the public understand and engage with the authority's mission to protect natural and working lands and connect people to nature. Through strategic outreach, the department helps foster public awareness, inspire community action, and makes conservation efforts accessible to all. The digital platforms are key to reaching diverse audiences, and our team leverages tools like targeted advertising, email outreach, and social media to share timely updates, educational content, and ways for the public to get involved. The authority's website serves as a hub for resources, updates, and engagement, helping visitors explore open spaces, learn about conservation projects, and connect with opportunities for participation. The Public Information Officer maintains relationships with local reporters and media outlets to amplify the authority's work, to put a spotlight on the agency's conservation work, education programs, land management, and public access opportunities in meaningful ways. By securing media coverage, pitching compelling stories, and engaging with journalists, the department helps bridge the gap between the authority's work and the broader public. Effective communication isn't just about sharing information, though. It's also about collaboration. The department works closely with staff across the agency, as well as partner agencies, to align our messaging and strengthen outreach efforts. Additionally, the communications department works to expand access to authority resources in multiple languages so that more people can connect with the authority's mission, making open spaces welcoming and inclusive for all communities. Public education and outreach aren't just supportive elements of conservation, they're foundational to building long-term community investment in nature. And whether it's inspiring the next generation of environmental stewards, keeping the public informed about project updates, or encouraging visitors to experience open spaces responsibly, this work is key to shaping a more informed, engaged, and environmentally conscious community who want to join us investing in nature. Looking ahead to this year, this department, the communications team is spearheading an expanded digital public education initiative to elevate awareness of the authority and deepen community engagement. And note that the team is going to present more information about that effort at the June 26th board meeting, so more to come. Through strategic outreach, the department is working to increase visitation to openspaceauthority.org, grow signups for the monthly e-newsletter, and expand our social media reach, continuously refining our messaging and content as we gain access to new data and feedback. In collaboration with partners, the department is also raising awareness about the need for wildlife infrastructure in Coyote Valley, and this ties to the longer-term vision and goals of CVCAM. In fact, coming up over the summer, new signage will be placed from North Coyote Valley outside of Laguna Seca all the way down Palma Avenue to Santa Teresa to highlight the Coyote Valley Conservation Program area, as well as remind folks to slow for wildlife, and keep Coyote Valley beautiful and trash-free. And finally, the department will continue advancing accessibility by expanding the agency's multilingual resources and disability inclusive communications.
Good evening, directors. Lee Rousher, Assistant General Manager, Administrative and Field Operations. And I just want to say, I think Megan, you just won the award for most hats. this evening. Thanks for filling in for Mark and Charlotte. We're going to tap back briefly to this very large slide. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the Administrative and Field Operations Division, which is the cluster of columns over to the far left. Next slide, please. And I'm both proud and inspired to work with staff in these three departments, especially Elizabeth, Derek, and Aaron. And I don't think I named them specifically, but administrative operations, field operations, and natural resources. On the surface, these three departments might seem like an odd grouping, but if you look more closely, you'll see that not only does the work within these functional areas tend to have a rhythm or a cadence that we like to think of as seasonal in nature, they're really all about stewardship. Last slide, please. Thank you. We're stewards of critters, of water, habitat in our lands, as well as the agency's home where we're sitting now, our people and the funds the public has graciously entrusted us with to spend wisely. Our role is to, at the very least, manage all of these resources to do no harm, and where we can, actually improve conditions so that these treasured resources thrive and have the opportunity to be the best that they can be. We see stewardship as an active and critical role to achieve the agency's mission. We bring our subject matter expertise, integrity, and trustworthiness, accountability, transparency to ensure that the public and our funders know what we're accomplishing and how the funding they've entrusted us with is being spent. We're leading the way to put architectures in place to guide and ensure the success of the agency's core work and the staff who perform it. We do this through collaboration across departments and with partner agencies. And leading into our agency values, especially equity and innovation. In a moment, you'll hear from Derek, Aaron, and then Elizabeth to give you more specific details about the work of their teams and what they're focusing on in the new year. So I just want to leave you with a few examples of work that shows up within this division. Our work looks like anything from a pond restoration, making a plan to knock down invasives, inviting the community to help us implement that plan, offering children of all ages an opportunity to learn about the land, climate, and critters, gathering data at Mayan Oyakma to inform its ongoing management, maintaining or cutting a new trail, delivering outstanding visitor experiences, which range from maintaining the best trails and preserves in the valley to sharing information about information about preserve with visitors, which could be anything from what the trail system looks like to please remember to take your hat and water with you today. We make sure that the agency complies with a multitude of statutes, policies, and good governance guidelines, working with the Expenditure Plan Oversight Committee in support of transparency, recruiting and developing the next generation of conservation leaders, and making sure they all get paid. And last but not least, making sure that board and committee meetings are not only compliant, but they come off without a hitch.
Good afternoon, directors. Good evening, I should say. Derek Newman, Field Operations Manager. Within the Field Operations Department, we have a multitude of programs that serve anything from the visitor safety and use of our preserves through the use of environmental education to raise awareness of items that are of importance to the public in creating a healthy landscape that out there, as well as the outreach, which is going to boost and other items there that bring, again, awareness of the Open Space Authority. Then the land management and operations side, it really is about operating the land and stewarding the land in tandem with our natural resource department. It's looking at each landscape that we have in the preserves and determining what we can do to further either heal the land and or maintain it in its current capacity, what we have. We also have the task of creating visitor management and ensuring that the visitor experience is of the highest quality, and that safety is always thought of first and foremost within them. So it's maintaining the facilities out there on the preserves. It is ensuring that the trails are maintained for safety and that the visitors have an opportunity to connect with nature as well as other people that are enjoying the preserves. We also ensure that contract land management is happening. We have two partners that we work with closely, which is the Valley Transportation Authority, VTA, and the Valley Habitat Agency, and actually, sorry, third one, Santa Clara Valley Water District. We're Valley Water now. You can see how long I've been with the agency. All the acronyms. So it is ensuring that these landscapes that are directly adjacent to our lands are also maintained and managed in congruency with our preserves so that the landscape is a much larger landscape for the animals and also public recreation to take place on these lands. In environmental education, the key really in that department is connecting people to nature and enhancing their awareness of the benefits, the multi-benefits of nature, and to bring nature to people when they cannot always come out to our preserves. There are a lot of barriers to having people come out to our preserves, especially the older population as well as the younger generation that doesn't necessarily get out to our preserves. And last but not least, our volunteer activities and outreach. This is, like I mentioned before, going out into the public at booth events that really bring home the messaging of what the Open Space Authority is, usually offering a lot of children's games and entertainment to allow the parents to interact with volunteers that are boozing those stations as well as our staff to really have a deep dive into what the Open Space Authority provides for all our residents within our jurisdiction. Deep diving into what some of our highlights for fiscal year 25-26 are is really working with our two programs that work closely with me, our three programs. Natural resources, planning, design, and construction, and communications. Now, really looking at working with those three, and you heard from Lucas already about the trails over at Rancho Cañada del Oro, the Coyote Valley trails as well, but then also natural resources. Aaron will probably hit a little bit on this, working with their team for Hidden Lake, restoring the landscape there, as well as any other number of programs. We just were working with them out in Coyote Valley on the Beaver Dam and the logs. So it's really about partnerships. Working with communications is critical for our environmental education and outreach departments in ensuring that our messaging is, as Megan had mentioned, on brand, but also ensuring that the messaging that we're hearing is what is really super important for our constituents to hear from the authority as a whole and weave in that environmental education process. Our booth outreach acts across the authority's jurisdiction this year will show a heavy presence this coming fall to raise awareness of the authority, with multiple events scheduled during the months of September, October, and into November. Spina Farms, heavy use of fall events and harvest events, and really looking at getting the messaging of who the Open Space Authority is out during that critical time. Summer offerings throughout our jurisdiction. We'll be doing National Night Out again, as well as a huge presence in San Jose's Viva Calle and other outreach programs that San Jose offers throughout the year. We have a new era of time coming with our equipment mechanic operator and environmental education programs. Now we have Dan Chamberlain and Mel Sorrento taking over from Dave and Terry, who will be riding off into the beautiful sunset, one up north and probably one a little bit out into the Midwest. We'll really be building on the foundation of the future environmental program with that, really looking at building family and youth programs, as well as reaching out to disadvantaged communities and going into those areas and bringing who the Open Space Authority is and what we provide. And also connecting people with travel challenges to those outdoor spaces. So again, bringing nature to them. One thing that Lucas touched on was the data gathering for input into our new maintenance management system through the Atlas program. For those of you like me that have been here, it's really an overhaul of our internal data that is ancient by Director Gill's standards. 22 years old is when it started. So it's really taking that and bringing it into the new age, working closely with Lucas's team and ensuring that we're upgrading all of that data. Also including new.
Yeah, the last question.
Yeah. And then it's also gathering data from the newly acquired lands. Again, there was that gap of time when we were kind of like looking at what the program was, not always gathering the data as the newly acquired lands came under our jurisdiction. And then updating what exists. One of our main field projects will be Coyote Ridge Road improvements, looking at road reroutes and also improving the ridge road where it currently stays wet during the rainy season, and raising it up from bad practices before the Open Space Authority purchased the lands. Tilton Ranch headquarter functionality of improvements, we'll be looking at installing a wash station for the vehicles to ensure that we're doing the best practices. We're ensuring that we're not transporting weeds and other sources of disease to the properties, as well as looking at increasing our environmental education opportunities out there and creating more storage space for an ever expanding field department that has multiple responsibilities. Enhanced staff training for visitor facilities management really talks about utilizing what staff has learned this year from attending both the American Trails International Trails Symposium and California Trails and Greenways Conference, and utilizing that and teaching additional staff and volunteers best management practices on our trails throughout our system, and implementing some of what we learned in ensuring that we have the best trails out there, which I already think we do, but it never hurt to increase it even better. And then last but not least, we will be instituting a visitor survey that will really focus on capturing the pulse of our users. What is working? What can be improved? What do we truly knock out of the park through our visitors' eyes? So really understanding from them, why they come out to the preserves, what they're looking for, what they enjoy, what could be improved, and really understanding and diving deep into that. And that's going to be longitudinal. It's going to be continually going on, and so that we can always be giving feedback to Lucas's team for future improvements, and also looking at how we can improve environmental education as well. And with that, I will pass it on to Aaron.
Good evening, Board of Directors. Aaron Hebert, Natural Resources Manager. It's nice to be here tonight. I'm going to highlight a few of the programs we run as a team. I'll say we are, by training, ecologists, botanists, agroecologists, I guess, too. And we really have three programs. Our Habitat Stewardship Program is really the stuff we do year in, year out to take care of the properties in conjunction with Derek's team. And what that looks like is invasive plant management, managing all the cattle we have, and the grazing program that does a lot of work on our grassland and fuels, as well as sort of broad scale restoration of some of those habitats. So collecting seed, planting seeds, restoring things kind of on an annual cyclical basis. That program also is growing in more of the fuel management direction, as all of our county is in managing fuels and fires. The other program I'll highlight is community restoration, and community restoration is really about large scale restoration projects, usually capital projects done in conjunction with Lucas's team, where long periods of designing and planning and permitting, all to make a really lasting impact on the environment. And the reason we put community in that title is we really like to involve the community in some of this work, usually through hands-on planting days. So one of our ongoing partners that I think Megan will talk about a little bit is with Point Blue and their STRAW program, which is students and teachers restoring a watershed. And they do a great job of bringing out local school groups, usually middle school and high school age students, onto our properties to do some of these plantings with us. So community restoration is a big part of what we do. It's sort of big, lasting capital projects, but then we really try to have people get their hands dirty in this work. And last but not least, we have also started an agricultural program at OSA. This position, Ana Regalato's position, started last year, and we'll be highlighting some of her work and some of your role in her work if you're interested in that. But this board, I know in the last couple of years especially, has expressed increasing interest in agriculture, and staff's response was to, one, create a position, but two, to start engaging you in some of that work. So I know an ag tour is hopefully going to appear on your calendar soon. So these are kind of the three programs that we have in natural resources. Slide, please. Thank you. So some of the highlights. Derek mentioned a hidden lake, as we call it. This is in Blair, where we're doing some of the trail planning and Rancho Cañada del Oro. Right now, I think starting this week, about $750,000 of pond restoration. This is really to benefit listed species like western pond turtle and California red-legged frog. It also benefits the grazing operations out there who need water to have the cattle. And then there are actually a handful of other little restoration projects, mostly along Fisher Creek, that will be completing this year. Of late, I feel like all I've been talking about is feral pigs. There's been, I think we had 5 interviews in the last week related to feral pigs. We're just about getting under contract to start this work, and this will be our first season of that program. It is a 3-year program. It's a 3-year contract. So trying to learn what works this year, make adjustments next year, and on to the 3rd year, where hopefully we'll have a lasting impact on that population. Happy to talk more about that. This will also be our 3rd year of operating Mayan Yakima, and the reason that pops up in the natural resources program is, as many of you know, this is probably the crown jewel of sensitive habitats in maybe all of Santa Clara County, and I think it competes well in the Bay Area. And so part of our work and Derek's team's work is to ensure that we have that, ecologically sensitive and appropriate public recreation. That's both through the butterfly pass system, which many of you are aware of, as well as sort of monitoring the surrounding habitat. So, when we opened that preserve to the public, kind of our pledge was to leave it better than we found it, and that involves some effort from all of our teams to make sure that happens. I mentioned this will be a good year to start going deep on our agricultural mission and niche within the food system. There are many organizations that work in agriculture in the county, all for the better. And there are a lot of challenges for farmers and for our agricultural economy in general. So I hope later in this year to return to the board with Anna to sort of engage you in thinking about what is our role in this space. It's always been part of our mission, but really, what's our role in this space? And we can talk about what we've done historically, but what's of interest to us going in the future. Kind of part and parcel of that. Nick mentioned that we'll be returning to the board later this year, towards the end of the year, with some plans for Coyote Valley, for the Coyote Valley Conservation Area. And that includes about 6 properties that are currently in farm production, and we'll have some farm-related planning to those properties. So there's the abstract stuff around agricultural strategy and our mission, but then there's the on-the-ground stuff here in Coyote Valley, and what does ag really look like? Nick also set me up for talking about some of our large-scale restoration planning, sort of dollars and cents. Those projects are very expensive, they're very exciting, and they're a really lasting impact. So I'll just highlight sort of 2 of the main themes there. I would say one is creating that wildlife corridor that is kind of at the heart of our work in Coyote Valley, and that looks like restoration, that looks like crossing structures in partnership with Post. Looks like really thinking about how critters are going to move through this land. The other big component of our work is where does the water go? How are we restoring Fisher Creek and Laguna Seca? There's been a lot of thought about how we can do flood protection, how we can restore an ecosystem, how we can better improve the county's water supply, which, as many of you know, is through groundwater. And this is a very important basin in Coyote Valley for groundwater supply. So all of that is happening in CP Camp, and we'll come back to you with more detail about what that looks like. In the meantime, while we're going through that more comprehensive process, my team has also been working on what we sometimes call these stepping stone or early implementation projects in Coyote Valley, where we're really trying to learn as we go, as we plan much more expensive and much more comprehensive projects. So over in the corner of this room, you may have walked in and thought, what the heck are those clay tiles? That is from one of our early restoration projects in Laguna Seca that took place last week, I believe. And That project really had two components. One was to build some beaver dam analogs that will help retain water in Laguna Seca, restore some of the ecosystem function that we're interested in. That's an amazing project. We'll share media information about that later. But the other part of that project was to investigate some tile drains, which are like a French drain that was installed by the reclamation group there, the farmers around 1916. So we used these old maps and old photographs. We put them in the modern GIS system, and then we got our excavator out there and we dug for them. So really amazing to find those original drains. We wanted to make sure that they weren't taking the water away, that we really want to keep on that landscape and understand if we do undertake larger scale restoration. Do we need to pull those things out, or can we leave them in there and they're already broken up? The other really fascinating discovery that I'm really interested in, you'll see little bits of it there, is we also discovered what looked like freshwater mussels as we were digging 3 to 4 feet down in isolated pockets. And as you may know, you don't see that a lot in this area. So we'll have to contact the Cal Academy and other kind of research folks and try to understand that historic ecology. So doing lots of good stuff while we're doing that comprehensive work. Another project I'll mention that we're undertaking, and you'll see that on the work plan, is doing some pilot restoration of re-oaking of Tulare Meadows. I believe Andrea touched a little bit on this idea of, how can we think of nature and nature-based investment as some of that sort of corporate interest in restoring nature, either for carbon or other kind of ecosystem benefits. But the goal of this project is to learn a little bit about oak restoration, which is a big part of CPCAM, as well as think about what are some other funding sources, such as corporate partnerships, that could help us do that kind of work. So last but not least, we are completing a badger habitat suitability and corridor modeling effort. Our friends at MidPenn completed a model last year that looked at badger movement through their isolated grasslands, but that model didn't come into our county. And so we were able, fortunately, to hire the same GIS technician to repeat that study. So we'll come back to the board maybe in a couple months with some early outputs from this badger habitat suitability model. Really fascinating creatures, and it's really interesting work. Thank you.
Good evening, directors. Elizabeth Loretto, Administrative Operations Manager. The Administrative Operations Department is a team of 7 focused on the operational programs you see listed here. While these are functions that occur in just about any business or industry out there, we get the privilege of bringing our skills to the authority's really meaningful mission and supporting all of the excellent projects and programs you've been hearing highlighted tonight. In the coming year, the team will continue to invest our time and efforts in foundational work for the agency that creates new tools, adapts to emergent needs, and supports staff in their own work to be good stewards of the authority's resources. This includes things like continuing to support staff development and succession planning, continued work to implement ADA policy and training improvements, systems of good governance and fiscal responsibility that demonstrate the authority's commitment to transparent stewardship of public funds. And in the coming year, our projects will include some technology system improvements, specifically implementing an agency-wide SharePoint with real awesome tools and protocols. As Derek mentioned, some of the things we dabble in sometimes still feel like it's 20 years ago. So it'll feel really nice to have everybody on the most modern options out there. We'll be evaluating asset management software that'll bring benefit across our departments and operations, and specifically will help field operations manage fleet and some of their specific elements, infrastructure out on the land when they need maintenance and repair and things like that. We'll also be looking at the infrastructure efficiency improvements for this building. We've been here just over 8 years. Actually, the end of this month, it'll be 8 years that we've been operating out of this building. We've reached its capacity. It's time to get creative about how we use it, but it's also time to look at some of the infrastructure that's ready for more energy efficient uses and things like that. So we'll start exploring what that looks like. But all in all, we're working to ensure that there's a rock solid foundation for whatever changes are going to come our way. in these next couple of years.
Thank you. And with that, we could, option one, dive straight into the numbers, or option two, take a quick short break. What would the board like to do?
Would anybody like to take a little stretch? No? Okay, I stand up and stretch and then.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm stretching.
Anybody you want to lead us in that
Alright. We've been sitting since 5:30, so. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, at this point, this is the staff presentation and, we can take questions on the board at this point. Do we want to take questions at this juncture?
We could, about any of the project or
Anything
programmatic
that
priorities.
Presented so far, would that be
Sure.
appropriate? Okay, because there was a lot of information
Yes.
presented, and I'm thinking some of the new board members may have some questions.
just a comment. Like, there are a lot of informations, you just presented today. It's very hard to digest everything. Just a suggestion, when the one, next time, not this one, when the next, when the one department done their presentation, I need a question answer there.
Sure.
Then the others start, then it's much easier. Even though I have a lot of questions, but I think maybe it's a mix up all the departments.
Got it.
So
No,
this
no.
is just a suggestion.
Yes, noted. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Matthews.
Well, everybody is so articulate, so dedicated. I'm really impressed because I'm actually trying to hang on to every single word that's spoken, and I'm learning so much. So I thank you for that. You really are good. I have a couple of really easy questions. CV Camp, I get Coyote Valley Conservation Area, but I don't know what the MP is.
Master plan,
What management plan?
master
Okay.
plan.
Master plan,
Yeah.
okay, I'm sorry. That's just a kind of a simple question. And I'm just thinking of things that occur to me as a new person here. There is agriculture. And then sometimes there's words about cattle grazing. But where does cattle grazing fall? It's not natural habitat, right? It's something other than agriculture.
Yeah, it's a good observation, and it really depends on the audience we're talking to. I mean, certainly, cattlemen, I think would consider them part of the agricultural community, right? Sometimes when we say agriculture, we're talking about row crops, things like orchards, hay, fruit and vegetable type production. So, when we talk about it in our mission, it's inclusive of all of those things. As a practical matter, lately we've been focused a little bit more on those row crops, kind of what most people think of as farms. But certainly, our grazing program is very extensive. It's a primary management tool of a lot of our conservation land. So they're a really important ecosystem service, cattle.
So the grazing, I just sort of see it as fire prevention. That's the way I'm here now. But can't grazing be harmful to the land if it's overgrazing or inappropriate in certain places?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'd happy to come back to you with a deep dive on sort of what's conservation grazing versus what's kind of regular grazing. Yeah, I mean, for us, the number of cattle, the season which they're deployed, and then kind of how you manage them between pastures and water sources. There's a lot of devil in the details, but our conservation grazing program and many others throughout, most open space agencies and parks agencies have similar programs, but they're all a little bit dialed into the particulars of their ecosystem. So I would say, generally the grazing that occurs on our hillsides is much more kind of conservation focused. Some of the grazing we have more on the valley floor is kind of more like conventional or sort of typical grazing, if that makes sense. And that has a little bit to do with what ranchers and grazers do on the valley floor versus the hills. So it's a whole evening's worth of content, but hopefully that answers your question.
I know you're on top of it. I was just occurred to me, just a curiosity point. Thank you.
Question? Okay, I have a couple. Yeah. Okay, Nick, on the CD Camp consultant, how well do you think, I mean, we know we had to reboot, and how do you feel about this consultant? Are they on track? Do you feel good about it? Do you think they're gonna meet the timeline? Are they ahead of schedule? I mean, what is?
I feel really good about the consultant team we have on board now. It's been great working with them since April. They're really proactive, thoughtful, creative. Both teams that we've hired, both the Connecting People team led by CMG Landscape Architecture and the Landscape Linkage team led by HT Harvey. We also have the great continuity of having CBEC Ecological Engineering. They were in the prior team. They built the hydrological model that we're using right now, and they're on the new team as well. So right now they're kind of hitting the ground running, starting to run the model to see how the water can flow across the landscape and how that might tweak our restoration scenarios. So they just sent us their timeline for running the models. I think they're, what did they say, Aaron? July, they're gonna have the model runs done. So we're going as fast as we can, and they're very eager to meet our goals.
It's great news. Okay, next question, and then, I was involved in this one when I worked for the city, so feral pigs. Of course, as a former employee in District 2, that was one of my constituents. So I'm really pleased to see you in the news quite a bit. And what I was really kind of interested is that the city of San Jose wasn't mentioned in the news. So are we now taking the lead on this? Or are you, I mean, my question is, are you working with the city, or is it just basically the county and Valley Water and other agencies?
Yeah, great question. We've certainly worked a lot with our fellow land managers, the Valley Habitat Agency, county parks, trying to think who else we've sort of worked closely with. But I would say those are our main collaborators. I think one of the things that the stories rightly highlight in the news is regional action by different entities taking this issue seriously. I know we've talked with the folks at Alum Rock Park because we're sort of neighbors there a little bit more. I would have to ask my direct report whether he's working directly with the city on it. But yeah, I would say, my staff have been doing a lot of work learning best practices and coordinating with these other agencies. And the thing that was also, I think, a little bit highlighted in the news was that OSA is making a pretty substantial financial commitment, maybe a little bit larger than some of those other agencies. So I think it's appropriate because, in broad strokes, there are a lot of pigs in the Diablo range. There are fewer in Coyote Valley and in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So I think there's a greater opportunity to really reduce, I don't know, eliminate, but substantially reduce the population in the Santa Cruz Mountains, as well as, hopefully making a lasting impact, at least in the critical habitats in the Diablo range. So we're doing a lot on the coordination side. It's definitely a coalition of the willing, and folks are learning how to best do this. OSA is also a little bit unique in that we're tapping into the private contractor market. Many of the other agencies in our area have worked with the USDA. And I think, they've largely done good work, but they've been stretched thin, and I don't need to belabor what's going on in the federal government. So we tried to go with the private market and bring in some of that labor into this area. So we'll see how that goes, and I'm optimistic.
Well, it's good outreach, and it's good public benefit, because it's been a considerable concern and, causing a lot of damage. And it was nice to see the agency highlighted in such a responsible manner. Because when I worked there, I would say the approach wasn't probably as responsible at that time. So anyway, kudos. Thank you, Aaron. That was really pleasant to read. And the other one that is one of my favorite ones is the wildlife crossing. So timeline when this is going to come back to the board. I'm following this one pretty closely as well.
Yeah, and by wildlife crossing, you're referring to some of the overcrossing or undercrossing structures. Yeah, so as you may recall, Post Peninsula Open Space, our partner, is sort of leading those design efforts. So right now they are they're kind of in preliminary design for some of those crossing structures. VTA is actually like the lead implementing agency on that. So it's technically like a VTA request for proposal, but Post is there in partnership. I've been involved in it. So that's Monterey Road. So I can't promise construction dates, but they are, you know, getting underway with design from their feasibility report, which, as you may recall, highlighted 3 particular crossings. And then there's kind of a parallel track that's a little bit behind on Highway 101, where they're currently assessing, you know, culverts and overpassing. There's a lot more existing potential wildlife structure on there. So a combination of repairing what's currently there. There's a lot of bad fencing along 101. There's a lot of plugged culverts. So they're trying to figure out like what's the most effective way to get wildlife through 101 and then to these proposed crossing structures at Monterey Road. So I think that report is in process. They're looking at not to get too wonky, but the way different critters move through the landscape. I mentioned the badger habitat suitability study. That is one component of many species that they're looking at as to how they'll get through these particular choke points.
Thank you. Director Minutes, any questions?
I do, thank you. And just thank you for all the hard work that goes behind building budgets. As someone from nonprofits that has to also go through budget approvals with the board, I understand the work that goes behind it. So I appreciate the time that the staff has put into this. One question that I have a couple, but one that comes to mind right now is around the highlights. This is my first budget. I'm curious, when you build out your goals or your expectations for the 25-26 budget year, are you also anticipating, are you building into the budget the changes that you need to make in case you run into any challenges, or if you need to pivot on your projects? What does that look like and how do you plan for that? And then my second question for this as well is, when we are looking at the highlights, are we just anticipating that to be just for the year? Are you budgeting for what a year would look like, and then we're looking for next year as if it needs to roll over?
I might ask Justina and Megan to kind of weigh in on the numbers part and how we pivot and how we look at multiple year budgeting.
I'll do the pivot, you do the future years. Okay, so pivoting, so we do have budget amendments that are possible if there are major changes to the budget that require, such as perhaps we accelerate a project and we might end up, needing to expend more expenses. It could also be where, costs that are unforeseen, we did not foresee it. I think one good example back then during COVID was the rising cost of construction costs, the materials. So that was also another thing that we took into consideration. So again, any changes to the budget, we do take to the board for approval. Yeah.
And in terms of kind of multi-year projects and how we look at things, it's a great question. It's a tough challenge because we've been hearing many of these projects are years-long projects, and we're only looking at a snapshot of a single fiscal year, of course, in this document. So we've done a couple of things. One, it's sort of a nascent effort, but we're working on developing a capital improvement plan that we started last year. We worked on a little bit more this year, and kind of each year trying to develop what that looks like. So that's nothing final, but what that lets us do is look ahead several years for each project and what's coming in the future, so that helps us. It's not approving every future budget year or anything like that, but trying to get a handle on how much is needed in the future, when construction is of all these different projects. And even personally, I'm always looking at it for what funding is needed, and I always need to know a couple of years out. We can't wait until we need the money to start looking. We need to be looking well in advance. So it really helps us do that. So that's part of how we get them. That's great. Thank you.
Yes. Sure.
There, and then we'll finish up with George Cannon.
Actually, the proposed budget is only this year or 26 also?
So the fiscal year runs from July 1st, 25 to June 30th of 26.
But it's written there 2025, 2025.
Okay, that is a typo.
It's a typo.
Yes, apologies, that is a typo.
I was confused myself. Anyway, so my fellow board member asked so many questions external, but I'm asking internally on the operations. So there is a couple software, you know that this is my favorite topic all the time. So so you have three software, usually is the two because the cybersecurity is very, every company actually need that. SharePoint. So explain a little bit, what is the use for that and then why we need that?
I will take a stab at it because I happen to be fortunate that Justina is here and might know more about it, but I'll try my best as a department manager to speak to it. SharePoint, right now, we still have a old server in a room in the warehouse that is just taking more management, the collaborative environment that we're working in with partners, with our own staff and kind of being hybrid in the workplace. OneDrive has gotten us far, but it has not gotten us far enough. So right now you might have documents in OneDrive and documents on the server, and it's just too many places. So the board awarded a contract for a consultant, Kiefer, to help us design an agency-wide SharePoint. I believe it was in the April meeting that award was made. And so we've just now started kicking off the project, but the bulk of the expense and the work would be continuing forward in the 25-26 year. And it would be creating project-specific SharePoints, department-specific SharePoints, as well as like an agency hub. And the ultimate goal would be that over the next handful of years, we are able to decommission the physical server in our server room back here.
The reason I ask that one, because if you look at all the department, the project you guys are running is interconnected.
Very interconnected.
So you think the SharePoint will help then the department will just look at what is the progress is there, then what is their share, they can just put the data inside there?
Exactly. Staff from any department can easily access it. Right now on the physical server, things are divided into drives that not all staff by department necessarily have access to. So there's a lot more user management in that way that we're currently experiencing that SharePoint would help mitigate for us. And we'd be able to Megan would be able to hit share with me and I could access and so it'll make it a lot more flexible.
So you guys are using in-house or just cloud?
Current
SharePoint would be online.
Yeah, SharePoint would be online, but currently we have in-house and a little bit of SharePoint, but it's not a very organized structure. So we are working with consultants to have a consistent structure.
It is not an on-premise SharePoint server.
Oh, this is a SaaS.
Yes.
SAS SaaS
Basically included.
platform, right?
It is basically included in the Office 365 suite.
Okay.
Mhm.
So take too much time. The reason is that is a two, okay. Department asset management. So what is the difference between these two?
Well, so
if you are using the SharePoint, why we need the other software?
The SharePoint is about work collaboration and files and records and data storage.
Okay.
The asset management is gonna speak to our kind of our physical locations so that we can log assets. So Derek's staff will be able to say that OSA 20, which is a pickup truck, is ready for service, and it'll create kind of ticket systems for staff to be responding to where physical assets we own and manage need support. And so they'll dispatch work through it. They'll be able to track maintenance logs so that if we ever need to be able to document when a bridge was last inspected, it'll contain that kind of data. So it ties in with the geographical information data as well.
So you think one software cannot just work like a SAP or those kind of?
No, and part of the problem with some of those larger softwares too is they can take dedicated staff. And while we need.
But if you have the SaaS, then you don't need anything, so they can do themselves.
They have such unique and distinct functions. There are some really specialized for parks and open space and land management and municipal like government management in the asset component that we're really excited by that we couldn't get without paying a really expensive customization fee from somebody like.
Did you guys check that or not?
We've done a lot of research and we did some demos. Mind you, it was a little over a year ago as we were first exploring what was possible. So we feel confident, but we also assure you we will only bring the board the best contract to recommend when it's time.
Okay, so that's we need that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Director Kennedy.
Thank you. Wow, this is a lot of information. My brain's full. But this two things. One is the function, the organization chart, and which is nice because I know when I first joined the board, the staff was about the same size as the board. And there's been some changes since then. And since we're such a people organization, it would really be nice to have the names associated with positions on this document. Just something to think about in the future. I kind of missed it.
We do have that document on our website and I can send you home with a copy tonight too. All of them.
But I mean, for this presentation, I know it's on the website. So when the general manager presented the fact that last year that our donations to acquisition outpaced our operations, I guess I followed it, but seeing it really was a shocker. So I'm just wondering, because I know we're thinking about stuff going on the ballot next year. But so's everybody else. You watch the news, every municipality, every agency is looking for a means to, even the city of San Francisco wants to, very few of the row homes have driveways. But if you have a driveway, they want to tax it. I mean, they're grasping and they're going back to the same well, and I'm not sure, I hope we're successful, but my crystal ball's in the shop this week, and I really couldn't begin to tell you how, what our chances are next year. Hopefully they're gonna be good. But what is it that what I'm getting is that as we gain more property, we're essentially digging ourselves into a deeper hole. And that's because of the donations that we can only use for acquisition and capital improvements. What prevents those donations from allowing us to do maintenance and capital improvements? Is it the donors themselves? Is it our enabling legislation? What is it?
You can have Megan answer that. Because it's a really important principle for the board to understand about where the money comes from, what the limitations are in using it, etc.
Yeah, it's a great question. For the most part, most of the money, like in that chart, those acquisition grants, depends on the source of the funds. A lot of these are from public agencies. If they come from a bond, for example, they have to be spent on capital projects. It's not something that the agency can choose to do differently or something like that. So we're pretty locked in to those requirements. And that's fairly common. Even if they had the flexibility to do other things, generally, you have a grant agreement, there's a grant term, and you can only do the spending within that term anyway. So it kind of refocuses things toward one-time expenses. Capital projects are almost always what gets funded.
And I understand that. And so what's the way around that? What's a way of?
Well, the best way around that is what we're pursuing. You see our sister agencies like Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District or East Bay Regional Park District are funded with property taxes. The Open Space Authority missed that boat in 1993. So we have been stuck with parcel taxes, which generate significantly less money So one hand is tied behind our back with that. But even looking at that, a parcel tax is much more flexible than a general obligation bond. So that's why when we go to the ballot, we have gone for parcel taxes, because we can, and your board can direct the best way to spend that money to meet our highest needs. And so essentially what we've been doing, and what this graph shows, Alex, is that over time, we are maximizing the use of our existing voter-approved taxes to steward and manage and care for the land that the public has entrusted us with, while going aggressively after state bond funds, foundation funds, etc., which, correct me if I'm wrong, Megan, but I would say 0% of those types of funds could ever be used for caring for the land, paying salaries for staff, etc. So I actually think it tells a really good story, and I know it's a crowded field out there, and every municipality is looking for revenue. Our public revenue is so modest, and we are leveraging it 3 and 4 times over to protect those lands that must be protected, because that's the starting point, but that's only the beginning. So somebody might say, well, stop buying land. That is not in our mission. We've got to continue to protect the lands that are dwindling out there for species, for climate change, for the benefit of the public. So I don't think we have a choice there. We have to keep protecting that land, and we'll keep going after those funds that'll allow us to do that. And that's where a partner like Post has been so extremely valuable. They go first, they're often in the lead position, they'll go and buy the land, but they hope we'll pay them back. So we'll aggressively go to the state to get funds that will reimburse Post, which then they put back into buying more land. And these partnerships between a government agency and a nonprofit are just essential. And almost every county in the Bay Area has such a partnership. Whether you're East Bay Regional Park District or Marin County or Sonoma County, this is how it works. And so we think that these graphics that we're showing you, and we have some more to show you a little bit later tonight, is telling the story that we're maximizing every penny of these local taxes that voters are approving. And remind you, when we did polling back in March, voters pretty grumpy when you ask them about taxes. But when you tell them the average homeowner will pay $24 a year, the percentage of approval jumps 10%. Because they see what we're doing with very little money. We're willing to charge a modest rate and do creative things with it. Partner with other organizations, make that money go farther. So until we can come up with a better approach, I don't know what's 10 years down the road or 15 years down the road. But until we get to a place where we have more flexible revenue to spend on caring for these lands, then we could do something like a major general obligation bond or green bond, partner with Santa Clara County, and do more climate projects, do more land restoration, those kinds of things. But it doesn't really behoove us to do big, expensive, sexy capital projects if we can't do the other side of the equation.
No, I agree, and you're clearly preaching to the choir here. And it's just frustrating that somehow as we grow, and we have to grow, to just sit, okay, well, just sit there and sit here and say, no, this is it, we're limited out until something else comes up. That isn't how we do business, and I'm glad it isn't. But it seems like there's another way around. When we get a parcel, and we know it's gonna take some money to bring it to our standards, etc. That we can't go and find a source that we normally don't use to keep the capital improvements and help us with our maintenance. Because we're, again, like I say, every time we grow, we're digging a hole at the same time. And it's frustrating. And so, and one idea, and I'm not sure I even agree with the idea, is some kind of corporate sponsorship. Where we go to a Google or someone to maintain the trail, and we can have a little sign for them says this funds maintain help by were donated maintain this trail by XYZ Corporation, whoever it is, something else, because we're going to be stalled, and if we don't make it, let's say we don't make worst case scenario. I've learned long ago to always plan against the worst case scenario. Let's say we don't make it in 26, and then along comes 28, and our economy's not a whole lot better. And people's attitude are also not a whole lot better. Thinking outside the box, and that's really my message here.
Well, I appreciate the message, and I haven't agendized this for the board yet. But I hope you'll be pleased to hear we're working on a parallel track on a very innovative initiative called Nature Investment Framework. And we're working with both local and national contractors. And we are approaching the business sector and the tech community about how the investment in nature figures into their business model. When you look globally, a lot of these companies have requirements now to measure and report their impacts on climate change. They are also being increasingly required to report their impacts on nature. Not yet in the United States, but in other places. If you talk to a handful of Silicon Valley companies, they have this environment, social governance, ESG goals and requirements that they're trying to meet and report out on. They have inputs and demands from clients, customers, and their own employees to be good global citizens. They have reputational risks. They have supply chain issues. And on that whole spectrum, we want to understand from the private sector what would motivate them to invest in the stewardship and care of natural and working lands in a place like Santa Clara County. This hasn't been done in California yet. We would be the first to do this. And so this past week, we've finished a couple-week process where we've interviewed 10 tech companies. Google, Apple, Facebook, Meta. Did I say Apple? Yeah, all the big ones. Juniper Networks, Adobe, water companies. So we've interviewed 10 companies to understand what their interests are. And we have a really good understanding now of the spectrum of interest. By and large, water leads. These companies are using more water for data centers, but they would love to invest in restoration projects in their backyards. How much are they willing to pay? So your board knows that 10 years ago in 2014, we brought a report to you called Healthy Lands, Healthy Economies. And we estimated with the help of economists that all the natural resources in Santa Clara County, those ecosystem services that Aaron was talking about, are worth between 1.6 and 3.9 billion dollars to Santa Clara County on an annual basis. If you have to replace those with hard infrastructure, it would cost you so much more money. What we didn't test at that time was willingness to pay. And so that's what we're doing now. So as we start doing restoration projects, say in Coyote Valley, our staff is estimating how much additional carbon benefit could there be? How much additional volume of water could be stored in Coyote Valley? And when we do that, we can say to the companies, we're creating a fund, a restoration fund, and we want you to contribute. Now, Are they gonna contribute enough money to make it worth our while? If they're gonna contribute $3 million to a restoration project, Megan can go to the Wildlife Conservation Board of the state of California and work her magic and get that with a whole lot less effort on our part. But if we can build something bigger, model it for Coyote Valley, expand it to Santa Clara County and then to the Bay Area and the state. Now we're starting a public-private partnership, exactly what you're talking about, Alex. So we're not expecting that 15, 20 years from now, our modest parcel tax are gonna be the silver bullet. There's gonna need to be something else. But this is what we're testing out right now.
Because we're gonna have to, we're gonna keep having our hand out the way we're going. We're gonna constantly, picking pockets basically. Yeah, okay, I'm glad to hear it. I just wanted to bring it in the open, because it's frustrating. So thank you for that response.
Well, you're preaching to the choir too. Staff is frustrated that we can't look 20 years out and say we have sufficient funding to add the staff requisite to manage not 30,000 acres, but 45,000 acres, or to do the requisite restoration and stewardship work that we need to do, but we cannot with the parcel tax, at least what we got now. One thing in our favor, we're a lean and mean organization. We make our money go very far, very efficiently. We talk about it a lot with the public. We leverage that money to bring in a lot more money, and we have zero debt. So we're still a public agency. We still tax the public. So maybe we have those two things against us. We're the government and we're here to help. But we're doing it well. And as well as any government agency can. And until there is a big silver bullet, a new way of doing it, I think we're being as innovative as we can. So I don't know if we really plan to talk about it tonight, but you'll see some graphics coming up on the screen in a minute. And we've just done, thanks to our communications department, some really compelling handouts, double-sided one-pagers that we're going to give to the board. So when you're talking to your constituents and they say to you, Director Kennett, why didn't you guys just get by with the money you have? And you say to them, I'm so glad you asked that question.
Yeah.
Let me tell you exactly how we use
that, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep, okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you for the robust discussion. Okay, we will move on to the second part of the
Yes.
budget discussion.
so my second part, we've been breathing this budget since November. So if I go fast, I will take pauses, but if I go fast, feel free to stop, stop me. I also don't have as many graphics as the prior slides. So just a fair warning there. But this is and on this slide, no typo, 25, 26. I apologize for the previous slide. This here is the revenues and other income. Revenues, the first section, it is consisted of contractual secured inflow of monetary sources that are like for sure. So basically District 1, Measure T, makes up that 12.5 million of our assessment revenue. We also are under contract with other agencies to be reimbursed when we perform land management services. So that's the second line right there. And then finally, we also have agricultural lease agreements where we know the annual revenue amount that's coming in based on the agreement. And then the next one is the carryover. That's using the accumulation of unspent revenues from previous fiscal years. And the proposed budget would recommend withdrawing some of these funds from carryover to use in this upcoming fiscal year to move forward some capital projects, some acquisitions, some natural resource habitat restorations. We anticipate using more than 4.7 million in carryover, mostly from Measure Q, to fund capital improvement projects, the master planning for North Coyote Valley conservation areas, and also acquisitions, while Measure T would continue to fund our preserve maintenance and operations, our restoration projects. And as we kind of mentioned, unfortunately, operating expenses continue to increase, and then benefit assessments are remain leveled. So we do find ourselves having to use carryover from District 1 to fund operating expenses as well. And then finally, we also have grants that we've secured. We are anticipating 1.5 that we would seek reimbursement for work that we'll deliver in the upcoming fiscal year. There's also interest income, grazing lease income. Those are typically budgeted based on historical trends. They're subject to fluctuations, such as interest rates changing, the capacity of the grazers that we partner with. So those are just estimates based on historical numbers. But all in all, we are anticipating revenues and carryover, the use of carryover and income to be about $19.7 million. So with that, that will help fund our budget. And so this is the breakdown of the proposed budget by major expense categories. So just for a quick overview, benefits, payroll and benefits, payroll, a little bit self-explanatory, our salaries. Benefits include our health benefits. That includes medical, dental, vision. Also includes required employer taxes, also our pension plan from CalPERS. Then we have travel and expenses. Those include mileage reimbursements, any type of allowance for typical business-related travel. We have supplies and consumables. That includes supplies in the office as well as in the field. So land management supplies that it's required. Other items might include, for example, safety supplies, and then uniforms as well. And then the next big bucket is the outside services. That consists of several subcategories. You might see expenses that are related to accounting and finance services, like for the auditors, the engineers report. We also have legal counsel. We also have IT services, different various communications related content and media services. And then we also have, of course, the resource management as well as the capital and acquisition related services, such as appraisal, CEQA, environmental site assessments, and engineering designers. And then so that's a big category. And then the second or the next category is other services and expenses. That typically is more of required costs, such as business insurances, covers any fees associated with the bank, permits, wires, escrow closing fees. Then we also, within this category, we also house the expenses related to our environmental educational program expenses, as well as our volunteer program expenses. The next one has to do with the equipment and maintenance, includes shop and field equipment, vehicles, computer equipment and software, as well as fleet maintenance. And then the next category, facilities and utilities. Most of the upkeep is involves this building, but it also includes some buildings out in the field on properties that we own. So then there's also just janitorial, landscaping, alarm services. There's the typical utilities such as gas, water, and power. And then the next category, memberships and sponsorships. That includes the cost of some memberships, such as, for the agency as part of, being part of CSDA, the California Special District Association, or either at an individual level of staff, professional memberships, to gain access for continued education, staying up to date to certain regulations. And then we also have that partnership sponsorships that we involved with for outreach. And then the next line is the acquisitions. That one is the cost of acquiring fee titles or a conservation easement. And then the last line is the grant program. That line includes the allocation amount for the urban grant program. And typically what we also see in there is any time during the fiscal year, we also make disbursements to the grantees when they've already been awarded the grants. And then so for next fiscal year, 25-26, we are looking at a proposed budget of a little under 19.2 million. Now pause right there real quick, see if there's any questions before I move on to the next slide.
Chair, could I just ask Justina and maybe Nick, could you shed a little light? The biggest line item there is obviously outside services and consultants. Just give the board a kind of a flavor of, it might not all be Coyote Valley Conservation Areas Master Plan, but that's a big part of it. And also some of our consultants on capital projects. Can maybe Lucas and Nick and just just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so like Andrea had mentioned, we do have planning services, construction. There's also just engineering as well as design. Those are the typical ones. Then besides for acquisitions, it's not just straight up just buy. We also have to do due diligence. There are appraisals involved. There are site assessments involved. And then if we get to the phase of a closing, there's escrow fees. And then there are other type of services that are related to natural resources. We have restoration consultants. Some involves the cost of the construction, but then there's also I could rattle off a few account, but then those would be our big ticket items, the restoration projects as well as the construction capital planning, design, and construction projects. And then, yes, there is CV Camp.
Yeah, I'm happy to add a little bit more context with the consultants that we use. They're not always cheap, more often than not. Hydrological model that we've been talking about tonight, for example, it's really expensive to build that model. It's expensive to run test model runs. We've invested so much in this landscape already. We think it's worth it to take the time to really make sure that we're making the right moves out there. So we have a really great team on board, as I've discussed earlier this evening. We're trying to use them wisely and efficiently. And we also have quite a bit of grant funds that are helping to augment the funds that OSA uses, over $1.7 million of grant funds for CV Camp alone. So trying to use those folks wisely and efficiently and augmenting them with staff support too. So trying to do as much as we can in-house when we have expertise in-house. We've written opportunities and constraints report this past fiscal year in-house, but looking forward to working with the consultants and using those dollars wisely.
Dr. Gill.
If you look at the total acquisition fee item and easements, the number seems to me look like very low. Why we are just stop buying the land?
It's not like we're stopping, but it also depends on the timeline. And I could always turn it over to Megan for more detailed, but I think it's the timing next fiscal year. It could be where we're in the progress, but we might not anticipate actually closing a landslide of acquisitions.
Excuse me, yeah, she's exactly right. For other acquisitions, it would be a much, much bigger number there if we were budgeting for a transaction like that. In this case, that's the excuse me, in this case, this is the other money set aside for the Andrade property with an unknown cost. So making sure that we have enough funds if we need to put more funds into that transaction. So that's why this is sort of unusually low for the land acquisition. But also just noting acquisitions, usually we get a lot of grants for acquisitions, as we saw on that earlier slide. So that sometimes can make the acquisition line item look really low, even though we're buying a very expensive property.
If we get the opportunity to buy any land during 25-26, then you think we have to amend the budget on that time, or so we need more money? So just we depend upon the grants, or what do you think? So how it work?
Yeah, good question. We certainly always try to get grant funding for things. Lately, we have been almost entirely grant funded for our acquisitions, like the chart earlier today. $21 million in acquisitions this year, and we spent $100,000 of our own money for 21 million. So our contribution is often very small, but we can't always do that. It depends on the funding available and what the transactions are. If we do get fortunate enough to get another big grant and a transaction coming, the way that we've handled it in the past is that does not require a budget amendment because the grant doesn't hit our books. It doesn't actually come to us. The funders put it straight into escrow. And so that is something that we don't necessarily pay anything out.
Okay, thank you.
But we would come to, through the chair, we would come to your board if we have an opportunity, and there are a number of acquisitions pending right now that we're engaged with, and Linda's leading those for us with multiple partners. So if those progress in the next couple of months, we'll be bringing that back to your board to give you more information, but it's a little speculative right now to put a lot of money in the budget for those acquisitions.
One of the factors just to point out, the item that was on consent tonight was a grant application for an acquisition, something like $15 million we're requesting from the state for that acquisition. So if that were to go through, you'll hear about it more if we get that grant and then before the transaction itself happens.
Thank you.
Okay,
Any other questions?
okay. Cool. And then next one. Okay. So as previously mentioned in the introduction, the executive leadership team, the management and strategy team, and staff worked really hard to analyze our expenses, look at areas where we could stretch our dollars, where we could defer spending, areas where we could maximize outside, leverage the outside funding. So how we did that was we took a look at our work and kind of determined what type of expenses kind of go toward the everyday, work of connecting people in nature, restoring the working lands. What are the one-time project costs that could potentially get outside funding to cover? And then we kind of broke down our expenses into 3 buckets. And what we did was, starting at the left-hand one, these were kind of our least flexible. They were either contractual agreements or costs that would increase based on just the market or somewhat out of our control, like business insurance or utilities. These non-discretionary type of operating expenses that we have to kind of make sure we have funding for to kind of keep running the agency. This doesn't necessarily mean that we didn't look at it for cost-cutting measures, but we intentionally and strategically kind of left, make sure we prioritize funds for these expenses. And now while the hard costs expenses were kind of operational in nature, we have this salaries and benefits that we kept in that bucket. They're not all entirely overhead. A portion of those salaries do lend itself or are attributed to projects as well. But again, it's expenses that we have to make sure we have funds to pay because, that way staff has a paycheck. And then another thing was that we wanted to maintain a level of service. And that meant that making sure field and natural resources were properly funded, their operations, they could continue to maintain the trails, restore the land. And so again, keeping that, we were looking at our budget, it was about a little under 13 million that we had to set aside. Yes.
Like the salary,
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you start any project, you think, so that salary is also included on those projects? Or it's just a flat salary, whatever you are paying? Like, for example, we start another project, right?
Mm-hmm.
That project need might be 5 people. So you think that project itself included the employee's salary or how it work?
So when we track our expenses, we do attribute our salaries to the project costs. Now, in terms of
You understand my question?
if you're talking about a new project coming on, does that mean we have to hire 5 people? Is that what
No,
your
no,
question
no.
is, or?
For example, we have one project is
Mhm.
start that. So then on that project is you have one kind of bucket there, right? Then we put some kind of money there, then the whole project will be completed in, for example, $3 million, right?
Got it.
So then those employees working in that project, that salaries go in that bucket or how it work?
At this current time, we do not, we budget the projects for hard costs only. It is a potential route we're looking toward to budget our time into projects as well. But at current state, it's only hard costs when we budget ahead of time.
Correct.
Mhm.
But
Okay,
I would say that it's one thing to track our staff's time, that maybe they spent 5% of their time on a particular project. That's helpful to know in reporting for the oversight committee, for instance. But it's another thing to be able to charge that time to a revenue source. So if it's just our own revenues, sure, we pay our salaries of our staff and we know what they work, what projects they worked on. But if we want to be able to charge to, say, a state of California grant or a foundation grant, there's only a fraction of staff time that can be charged and legitimized for that funding source. But yes, we're tracking, yes, we know staff's working on these projects, but all of that time cannot be attributed to that funding source per se.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, okay. No problem. Okay, the middle one, that's our programmatic operating expenses. And over the last 2 years, we've evaluated our expenditures, we've tried to maximize our savings. And then also just stretching our dollars and impact with sponsorships and partnerships, or investing in technology, improving processes to kind of increase efficiencies. And the type of programmatic operating expenses could be, for example, for in admin, staff development. It could also be, for example, travel and expenses, or discretionary in that nature. And then the last bucket on the right are our projects and capital expenses purchases. So this bucket of expenses is kind of the I would consider the most flexible in helping us manage our costs. It allows us to look for outside funding for capital projects and acquisitions. We could scale the scope of work every year. We could also shorten or lengthen the timelines of the project. We could defer the project until funding comes along. And so this was kind of when we were doing this exercise, kind of looking at how we were building out the budget. What type of capacity of the projects can we take on with existing staff? Because later on, we'll talk about how we are not adding staff to our headcount. And so it's more of kind of helping us manage our workload without, taking our budget way out of proportion. And so kind of that 19.2, a little under 19.2 million proposed budget that the board is seeing, that is kind of the breakdown of the buckets that we've kind of worked. So in short, if it's anything to take away, again, goes back to our leveled revenues. Our revenues right now at this current moment, kind of like a very high level, it's basically paying for the bucket on the left. The carryover that we're needing to withdraw is what's paying for the middle and the right. So numbers wise, obviously, again, the salaries can be attributed to projects, but kind of how the numbers shake out is where you're kind of starting to see that kind of leveled revenue and where we have to use carryover to fund the remainder of our budget. Any questions so far on that part before moving on to the next slide? Okay. And then kind of, I'll turn it over, but we'll kind of deep dive into that left bucket, because of that little bit under 13 million, you're going to see that about 9 million is salaries and benefits. So I'll turn it over to Elizabeth Loretto, our Administrative Operations Manager, to kind of go over the stats related to staffing.
For the 2025-2026 fiscal year, as you see in the bottom there, our salaries and benefits reflect 51% of that total planned expenditures of 19.2 million. And we've broken it out there as to how much of that is salaries and how much is benefits. This year, one of the factors that contributes, of course, to our salaries and how it changes every year is our cost of living adjustment applied to wages. So in this year's budget proposal, we are recommending a 2.7% cost of living adjustment. And that comes from the consumer price index data available for the San Francisco Bay Area region in March of 2025. And historically, for the last, well, I believe it is about 10 budget cycles, the Open Space Authority has employed this model to recommend the cost of living adjustments based on that March report for the region. We start tracking in December and just kind of keep an eye on how it's trending, so that as we're planning our budget, we're also having a sense of what that could look like. We have done comparative research for the cost of living adjustment in terms of how it compares to what's going on in some of our peer agencies. As we keep that in mind, how we retain a competitive benefit structure and for our employees. Many of our peer agencies are pre-agreed to through collective bargaining agreements. And so just to give you a little context, East Bay Regional Parks is looking at a 3% cost of living adjustment. Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District is also looking at 3%, and Santa Clara County Parks is looking at 4% for the same time frame. As we look back at our historical cost of living adjustment, we have found that the average of what's been implemented through those past 10 budget cycles so far has been 3.23%. So even though we do this very specific approach each year, the net average is still keeping on trend with our peers. And if we move forward with approving this 2.7% cost of living adjustment, the average would decrease a little, but it would actually go to 3.01%. As Justina mentioned, balancing fiscal responsibility with mission delivery, the authority will not be adding regular new staff positions to fiscal year 25-26, but we will be adding 2 new paid internship positions, which will bring us to 5 paid interns as noted on the screen. So 65 total positions, 3 of which are strategically being left vacant for the time being. And we'll look at that on the next slide. So we've been all evening kind of really grounding everybody to what's going on in each of our departments and divisions. So this is the CPC division and the departments composed within. So we'll use this to kind of walk through the staffing changes that are part of the proposal before you. So the next two, they walk us through the proposed new positions and position changes that help us better align our programmatic and department functions with current operational needs of the authority. So first, in the communications and media department, we have a rate classification recommended for the public information officer to be promoted to the new classification of public information manager, effectively becoming the communications and media department manager. So if you do look at those, we did provide named org charts with you. You'll see Mark Landgraf is currently serving dual hats of assistant general manager and the department manager for communications and media. So that would divvy up that work a little differently. And then the next category in the strategic conservation and strategic partnerships department, there are 2 reclassifications, again highlighted with the italicized font. So one of our grant program coordinators, Jackie McBride, is recommended to be promoted to the new classification of community investment specialist. This is a new position with continued focus on the authority's urban grant program and an added emphasis, an enhanced emphasis to provide collaborative leadership for the agency in building and maintaining partnerships with community organizations. And kind of as an impact to that, the community impact and policy specialist is recommended to be reclassified to a new conservation policy specialist, creating a deeper engagement and leadership on policy issues. And then in orange, highlighted there, that is where one of our new paid interns would be, and that is a policy intern, which would engage in a broad set of activities that support policy engagement in areas for our conservation projects and programs. And then long range planning, again, in the italicized, an associate open space planner is recommended to be promoted to senior open space planner, allowing for more project responsibilities within the long range planning department. And in planning, design, and construction, the blue indicates one of those positions that we are proposing to remain vacant for the upcoming fiscal year in a senior open space planner. And then we are also looking to bring on the other paid internship, which would be a GIS focused intern.
And then next, on the administrative and field operations departments, we have two of the two remaining positions that are being strategically left vacant, our deputy clerk of the board in administrative operations and the open space tech one open space tech 2 in field operations. So we continue to strategically delay the backfilling of these positions. It's been a couple of years for some of them now. And these continued vacancies have been taken into account with the capacity and the workload of the projects before you this evening. And with that, back to Justina, unless you have any questions.
Okay. Okay, so then this kind of goes in a deeper dive for that middle column of the middle bucket. The discretionary allowances, some of the items that make up a big portion of the discretionary expenses is we've created a new kind of set of allowance. And what it is there's an agency emergency response allowance. It's a new allocation of $50,000 that we're setting aside in the event of an emergency. But because we don't know if we can count on FEMA, we're basically being very responsible and being prepared by setting that aside. In terms of process, we do anticipate that any use of this fund will need at least a minimum AGM or general manager approval to use. It'll be available to all departments, but it will sit in the admin department budget. Another allowance is the Measure T administrative allowance. That is, we're keeping a leveled amount that's similar to this current fiscal year at $2 million. As per the expenditure plan for Measure T, the board can approve a reasonable amount to fund administrative expenses using Measure T funds. So it does not have to necessarily be focused on projects. And so that we were proposing to keep that amount at $2 million. And then the last allocation is the Urban Grant Program. We are proposing to allocate another $100,000 toward the pot of money. And again, I have a next slide that kind of explains as part of each budget year, the board approves an annual allocation to the program. Now it takes about 2 to 3 years to kind of, build up enough money to run a solicitation. And that's when we go out and have the grant cycle from the grant making team. And then from there, depending on the grant agreement amount, it also might take several years or a certain period of time for the agency to actually disperse and reimburse the grantees. And so, for example, right now we still have the cash, but it's been set aside for the grantees that's been awarded grants, and we've been dispersing them as work is being done. But we're proposing the $100,000 to put into the grant program. Any questions regarding the allocations that we've set aside? Okay.
And through the chair, Justina, perhaps you said this, could you tell the board what the amount is or
Sure.
in the...
Sure. So the amount available as of June 30th, 2025 that we're anticipating will be 1.4 million. And then would you like to share the...
Just to add that, so there's that 1.4 million is the total available. The solicitation that's currently out hitting the streets right now is for 750,000. So presumably all of that would be awarded. And we like to try to not use the entire balance so that in case we want some flexibility on a board night, but also, as she mentioned, it takes a few years for us to build up enough. So we never want to go all the way to zero because it would take a long time to build up enough to do a big solicitation.
Okay. So how do we compare from this current year's approved budget? So we, kind of going through some of the salaries and benefits, we kind of heard we have a few reclass, 2 new paid intern positions. But another thing is we also had a major increase to our benefits costs, and that's due to the CalPERS unfunded liability expense that we have. So that was one of the drivers of driving the current fiscal year's increase. And then in terms of departmental expenses, We've got a few travel expenses have increased compared to last year. Just the typical cost of supplies and consumables. One with just more acreage, more consumption of the land management supplies, but as well as just the cost of things going up. Just planning for that. But the outside consultancy also went up about 42% overall, but the majority of those expenses are due to grant-funded projects. So the net OSA increase was only 25%, and most of it occurred in the Environmental Education Initiative and outreach costs, the natural resources costs, and long-range planning for the outside services. Other services expenses dropped 32%. One of the biggest driver is is the election cost. There is no election cost this year. And then the equipment and maintenance expenses went up slightly, but again, that increase is grant funded. 50K of the 65K increase it's all related to a cybersecurity grant expense that we may anticipate. And then a few more increases here and there, but again, has to do with different projects that have come up in this fiscal year. For example, facilities and utilities went up 15%, but we had a few maintenance project related to LED lights and ADA planning deferred from this current year that we will pursue next fiscal year. And then one of our biggest drop, as mentioned by Director Gill, acquisitions was reduced greatly. And again, it goes to the fact that we have acquisitions in the pipeline. We may not anticipate any, a large amount of acquisitions next year. But at the same time, if we do get acquisitions and they're grant funded, it goes directly into escrow. It doesn't hit our books and doesn't hit our budget. So in terms of that's more of our net amount that we use to leverage, and that's our budget there. And then we have capital improvements have increased from the current fiscal year. We have the Blair the ponds at Rancho, that was about $500,000. We have the Coyote Valley expanded public access project, that's about $1 million. We have a stepping stone restoration project, about 180,000, and then CV camps a little under 1 million as well. And again, these are budget, but we augment it with outside funding as well. And then capital purchases, we have a few vehicle purchases and electric infrastructure planned in the budget. So then that is also an increase from the current fiscal year in terms of our proposed budget for capital purchases. But as I've mentioned, how we compare in terms of our net use of our own money. So total proposed budget is the low under 19.2, but we are anticipating using some grant funded, grants to fund the expenditures, 1.5. So our net use of our own money is about 17.6. And so that's a slight increase from the current fiscal year where we're anticipating using 0.5, my rounding, 17.56, and then for next year we're proposing 17.64 in terms of our use. And then and as we very much express, that grant number might seem small considering you just heard we brought in almost 21 million. It's like, oh, well, why is that? Again, that went straight into escrow, doesn't hit our books. This grant amount is what is either funders are reimbursing us, so it comes back to us as reimbursement, or that they paid us in advance, and then we're basically now recognizing that revenue when we actually deliver on the projects. So that is what shows up in our books, and that's what we're seeing as a 1.5. But again, it's a much higher number in terms of the grant amounts that were awarded, but in accounting, I can't count that, unfortunately. I have to count what we're actually going to deliver and get reimbursed for. And then that kind of concludes our presentation. If there's any other questions regarding specific line items, I can also answer that. I have the budget in front of me. Okay, I'm ready.
We're doing this as a question.
Yes.
Really quickly back to the University grant and the board's completion things for the years. I'm curious as to whether the 100K is sustainable for year after year, and like, what's the rationale that's determining that?
It's a great question, and it's always hard to balance our own needs, wanting to also fund the grant program. But in recent solicitations, you know, in some years we've done 1 million, I think our first year was 1.5 million. But we've also had smaller ones, 400,000 one year, this year's 750,000. So with that balance, that 600,000 or so extra that we'll have left over after this solicitation, we think that adding 100,000 only, while that's a modest amount, still brings us up to that 700,000-ish range. That's a healthy enough amount that we could do a robust solicitation the following year. We wouldn't want to probably, we'll have to watch this over the years to make sure that we continue to invest so that we can continue, do that, because it goes quickly on award night. Great, thank you.
Director Sunderland. Thank you, and I'm gonna give a disclaimer. I have the benefit of having done looking at the budgets for Valley Water for a long time, so I learned some great things from some of my other committee members that I'd like to suggest. The first one was on page 46, where you have the natural resources GIS monitoring tools. The funding source is Measure T, but it doesn't say how much. So I'm hoping you can go ahead and fill that in. Or is there's no budget for it? That's what I think there should be. On page 48, I'm sorry.
Got it. Okay. So for our projects, when we budget only the hard costs. So this project is going to use mostly staff time.
Okay,
And-
and
and
it's
so-
Measure T because Measure T is
Well,
funding staff time?
yes.
Okay, thank you. And then, the fees for, land mitigation or when we do land mitigation, is there a built-in cost adjustment, like a COLA for that?
Yes, we update our annual fee schedule according to our approved COLA. But per the agreement, like for some of the agreements, it cannot exceed 5%, for example. So should there ever be a year where COLA hits that, we would be capped at a 5% increase. But yes, it does have adjustments.
Fantastic.
Mhm.
And then what about for supplies? Are there any supplies associated with that?
This is still regarding the land management one.
Yes.
So that one's at cost, so it's what we pay for, they will reimburse. So there's, and then there's one, for example, that will help cover some overhead. They apply whatever outside consultants that we secure for that work, and they will add like a percentage of overhead to cover staff time as well.
Thank you, because I didn't want us to get caught in
Yep.
tariff cost increases and stuff like that. And then, when you do list external funding in the charts, when you say it has external funding,
Mhm.
any of the projects, is it possible to include who you anticipate the external funding will be coming from?
Sure.
I think that's kind of helpful, and for me, it's helpful, figuring out, because I think right now, a lot of external funding may be unstable. And so it will help me look at budgeting that way. And if the external funding falls through and the project's no longer viable with just OSA money, the funding that's set aside from OSA, what is the process? Would it be reallocated to another high priority project so that we still do show that we're moving forward on some projects, even when our even if external funding falls apart?
There's many different scenarios. One is may not necessarily be reallocated to another project because just staff capacity, just timeline, but it would definitely come back into carryover. It'll roll over for use in the next fiscal year and get reallocated to whatever priorities would be at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And, oh. I know that there's mention of the Monterey Road Animal Crossing project, and I think the city of San Jose is a partner in that. But,
Mhm.
did they approve that in the budget message?
Yeah, well,
Nick?
There we go. Are you referring to the Monterey Road Designs
Yeah.
study? Yes, so great question. That is a project that's focused on the design of the street itself and not the wildlife crossings. And we have 100K that we proposed in our budget for next fiscal year to match the Department of Transportation's 100K. As far as I know, that money is still in their budget. We are in communication with DOT about how to proceed with that project because a part of the impetus of it was a land use study for Monterey Road that we've learned has been paused.
Okay.
But we could still decide to proceed with street design independent of that. So that's something that we're talking about right now. So we've decided to keep it in the budget for now in case we decide to move forward with it in the next fiscal year.
Thank you. And I guess part of this is just seeing everything kind of crashing.
Yeah.
So.
Through the chair to your earlier question, if you were concerned about CV Camp and its external funding, none of that is from the federal government. The sources that we're listing in the current year's budget are primarily from county parks and from the state coastal conservancy.
Oh, that's really great to know. So if that could be included for external funding, that would make me feel a lot better. Thank you. And what else did I want to ask for? Oh, and this goes back to the original the first presentation. The Docent Led Walks are fantastic. And I've done them, and what a great organization, because I think everybody feels so well taken care of and listened to and just taught different things on the Docent Led Walks. So thank you very much for doing that. And that was it. So thank you, our chair.
Madam Chair, could I just ask Director Sutherland, are you asking that before we finalize this budget, which doesn't mean we have to delay the vote tonight, but that you wanted to see the source of the anticipated external funding?
I don't think we need, could it be supplemental information that comes later, so you don't have to,
Yeah,
I'd be good with that.
Okay. Thanks.
Does that work for all of you too?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? This way.
I have.
Okay, yes.
I do have a question. Could you explain just briefly, Andrea, the carryover restrictions? And why, the nature of the restrictions and what is restricted and what isn't? Or is it board policy or is it something else?
Well, Justina I'm cluing in on your use of the word restricted. So Justina.
Yeah, so the thing is, each fund, we do not commingle the funds as per required by Measure Q, Measure T as well. But each fund, what happens is, for example, District 1 brings in 4.2. In previous years, we might have spent less than the 4.2 million. And so the thing is, it kind of comes back into like our savings. We call that, so unspent revenues would be the carryover. Now, in terms of each individual fund, they do have certain parameters of what it could be spent on. Measure Q, as governed by the expenditure plan, has 4 major expense categories that it could fund: projects that are protecting land, restoring water resources, The third one is capital improvements as well as maintenance of our preserves. And the fourth category is the urban grant program. And so as long as it kind of, if the project or the work meets the criteria of those four categories, they can be funded by Measure Q or by Measure T. So I'm hoping that answers the kind of the restricted portion of what, or if I'm interpreting it correctly.
I thought maybe there was board policy that had been set in previous years about when,
So the,
what carryover funds can be used for. Can they put in a reserve fund?
Mhm. So there is one board policy called the reserve, I don't think there's a word fund in there, reserve policy. So we have a fund, for our, we named it our reserve fund. That was a result of a settlement of, we tried to go out for District 2 benefit assessment. We ended up getting a settlement. We got to keep some of the funds. That is actually unrestricted. We could use it for any type of expenses. But the board had passed a policy to set aside 14 million for operational expenses. And the rest can be used for capital expenses of the balance. So that is the only board policy that dictates that set of how that 14 million can be used. The rest is more through the budget of Measure Q, Measure T, what we would spend it on. Does that kind of help clarify? Yeah, of course.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so thank you for the excellent presentation and the thorough line of questions from the board. I think we've got a great budget going forward, and at least, I think you're taking into account the economy, and I think you're, taking into account the current public perception that, we have to do as much as we can with what we have, and I think we do. So now that we've had the presentation and we've had the questions from the board, then I will open up the floor to the public hearing. Before it's open up public hearing.
There are no comments.
There are no comments. Okay, well, being there's no comments, we'll officially close the public hearing. All right. Now we get to the point. I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to approve this big, beautiful budget that's been presented to us tonight.
I'll do the second. Because I just received this one. I like it.
Oh.
And then you can just make the note there. Each slide. Thank you.
No problem. But we will take pauses next year as well. We'll take, consider.
Yeah, I think the way you took the time to present it and go through it with the department and, to answer all the questions that we had, especially again, we have a lot of new board members and making sure that everybody, felt heard and understood. I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt the annual budget, an annual work plan and salary position pay plan for fiscal year 2025-2026, moved by Director Kennett with a second by Director Gill. Call roll.
Director Kennett,
Yes.
Director Matthews,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Sutherland. Yes. Director Dominguez.
Yes.
Director Gill.
Yes.
Okay, your budget has passed
Thank
unanimously.
you.
All right. Let's move on to something fun. Okay. The next item, we are going to approve the appointment of director and directors to fill the vacant board committee and non-authority liaison seats left by former director of District 2 and District 6 directors. Caroline, are you going to present this one?
Yes, so Caroline Hernandez, clerk of the board. I will just provide a little bit of background information and then I will hand it back to you, Chair. So the reason for this, the following committee seats were left vacant after the passing of District 2 Director Mike Flaucher on February 23rd, 2025.
the Ad Hoc Committee for Urban Grant Programs, and the Bay Area Ridge Trail Council as the board liaison, and Santa Clara Valley Water Commission as the alternate. The following committee seats were left vacant after the resignation of District 6 Director Mike Potter on May 5th, 2025. Land Use and Stewardship Committee, Director Potter was the chair of that committee. The Ad Hoc Committee for Financial Sustainability, the Salt Ponds Restoration Forum as alternate, and Santa Clara County Special Districts Association as alternate. So now I will pass back to you, Chair.
Okay. As we've normally done in the past, we'll take each committee one by one and entertain if there's somebody that's interested in it. So for the Land Use and Stewardship Committee, so we currently have Director Kennett and Director Sutherland who are on that committee. What do we do? We can do coin flipping, see, which one of you is interested, but who is interested in being on the Land Use Committee? Director Matthews or Director Dominguez? And I'm assuming Director Kennedy will probably move into the chair position. Okay, all right.
Madam Chair, can I just check to make sure that the descriptions of those committees were provided to the board so they understand what the Land Use Stewardship Committee is?
That's a good question. I am operating off of my cheat sheet here.
Could one of the staff who sit on that committee just give a short synopsis of that?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure, I'll speak on behalf of my colleagues, Nick and Derek and Lucas here. The Land Use and Stewardship Committee is really charged with looking at some of our projects, some of our policies related to how we operate our preserves, how we steward our preserves. Usually we'll check out projects in motion, some of the capital projects. So tends to be a lot of things that people can see and touch. A good example of a recent item was a preserve designation policy, how we title our preserves, how we talk about them. I think we went out to Coyote Valley Open Space Preserve to look at some of the ADA trail projects out there. So it's a little bit more applied, I guess, a little closer to the dirt.
The keyword field trip. Does that help, guys? You actually get to go out to the site, look at it, talk with staff and. I get to be the one? All right, let's see. Director Dominguez, would you be interested in serving on this committee?
Is it possible to review all the committees before making the decision?
Well, we can. I think this is probably the most exciting one that we're gonna review.
Yes, I'll be happy to step in and be a committee. Thank
The
you.
one that's probably the civic. I think you would enjoy this.
Oh, this is great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So that takes care of that one. Okay. The Ad Hoc Committee for Urban Grant Programs. Is that one meeting or has that already concluded for? Megan? You're really, because you're underway.
Exactly. So it's one of those, I think we've formed it the last couple of years just as, sort of routine. But generally speaking, Jackie McBride, who runs the grant program, we really come to that committee when we're developing new guidelines and we're not currently developing new guidelines. So it doesn't mean the committee can't form, but there's not an immediate need.
Okay, so, okay, well, we can kind of just TBD on that one. Okay, sounds good. All right. Now the one for the Ad Hoc Committee for Financial Sustainability, I do have a recommendation for that one, and I'm hoping Director Matthews will step forward in that committee.
Yes, I'll accept that assignment.
Okay, wonderful. Method in my madness here. All right, now the next one, okay, this is not the very sexy one, guys, but it's really fun because I chair it. It's the Special Districts Association. I chair, and most of them are via Zoom. We just had a very lively discussion from the resource agency, and I think next time we're going to be having a presentation Valley Water, and then I think we're going to put open space into the rotation. So that is up to either one of you that wants to be an alternate.
I'd be happy to step in as an alternate. Thank you.
Great, thank you, all right. And then, salt ponds restoration. It's probably the salt ponds are in the northern part of the district. See where I'm going with this. Director Matthews, would you like to be the alternate to Director Alexander?
Is that Alvisa?
Okay. Okay. I don't know how often they meet, do they? That one is.
They haven't met.
Definitely.
But the committee is still, the committee is still in existence, and so at some point they will schedule a tour or a meeting.
Okay, okay, great. And where are we on that? So we have Bay Area Ridge Trail Council. Are they meeting?
Bay Area Ridge Trail Council does meet. This role is merely as a liaison. So there's no formal, the director would not be on the council. It's just kind of monitoring the meetings, reviewing the agendas, connecting with the council, or attending meetings and reporting back. So it's the role is fairly minimal.
Okay, but I have Director Gill as the alternate, so would you be comfortable just moving into the role? No problem, all right. Easy, okay, and then the last one is, where am I? Where's my little cheat sheet? Water Commission. The Director Gill, you have the position, then we had Director Flocker, who was the alternate. Is there somebody interested in being as the alternate? Director Sutherland. Okay. Anybody want to arm wrestle her? No, not tonight. All right. Have we got them all? Wait, what are you assigning her? I think that's it, right? Is that all is that?
Through the chair, would you mind repeating the last appointment you made?
Santa Clara Valley Water Commission is already Director Gill serves on that, but the alternate was Director Flocker, so Director Sutherland would like to be his alternate.
So who will be water commission alternate?
Me?
Or you?
Yes. So if you can't go, you need to talk to her.
No, actually I was Laha, right?
Flocker was the alternate.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's changed to Sutherland?
Yes. Yes. All right. Are we good?
Can we make a motion to?
Yes. Okay. Okay, if I've got them all, would somebody like to entertain a motion with all the above appointments? Or you can read what she's got written on the screen.
I would like to make that motion.
Yeah.
Because we don't know who it is, right?
Sure.
Okay, it would be to appoint Director Dominguez to the Land Use and Stewardship Committee.
Have these, ad hoc.
We're gonna leave vacant the ad hoc committee for the urban grant program. Move Director Matthews to fill the role of Director Potter, former Director Potter, for the Fiscal Sustainability Ad Hoc Committee. And Director Matthews to be the alternate for the Salt Ponds Restoration Forum. Director Dominguez to the Santa Clara County Special Districts Association, alternate, and Director Sutherland to the Santa Clara Valley Water Commission as an alternate. And then, I'm sorry, did we capture Director Gill to the Bay Area Ridge Trail Council? We did not, I'm so sorry, yes. And Director Gill is now, to the Bay Area Ridge Trail Council. Thank you.
All right. What an excellent motion.
And I believe Director Dominguez made the second. Okay.
So I need that.
Yeah. All right, we concur? All right, let's call roll.
Director Kenneth,
Yes.
Director Mathis,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Sutherland,
Yes.
Director Dominguez,
Yes.
Director Gill.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passed unanimously and good luck. No, it's fine, it's fine. All right, now. Yeah, oh, I forgot to say, was there any public comment on that?
There was none.
No, okay, great. All right, we are gonna move under old business, which is receive report from the Financial Sustainability Ad Hoc Committee to explore feasibility of a June 2026 funding measure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, staff. Good evening, directors. This is a continued business and informational item on exploring the feasibility of a June 2026 funding measure. As you are aware, from October 23 through the present, the Financial Sustainability Ad Hoc Committee of the board has been meeting with staff to discuss the authority's growing revenue needs and to discuss potential approaches to a funding mechanism, and then ultimately to recommend that to the board. So through your board's action just now, the ad hoc committee is now comprised of directors Chapman, Sutherland, and Matthews. Next slide. So very briefly here tonight, we're going to be giving just a little bit of status report on stakeholder outreach and public education and analysis of past expenditures under Measure Q and T. Next slide. So authority staff continues to provide general public education and outreach to raise awareness about the work the authority performs on behalf of the public, how we leverage voter approved tax revenues with our modest revenues, and how we attract significant outside grant funds for capital investments, the agency's anticipated financial needs over the next 15 years, especially for management and stewardship of our growing system of open space, habitat, and agricultural lands. In terms of that outreach and education, our communications staff has been doing some terrific work. And I just wanted to report out our work recently with Landis Communications and what that is reaping. Our Facebook views have increased from up to 150,000 per month to 1.1 million in May. Our Facebook link clicks increased from less than 200 a month to over 4,500 in May. Instagram reach increased from up to 150,000 a month to nearly 450,000 in May. We've gained more than 1,000 Facebook followers since the initiative began, and we've gained more than 1,000 Instagram followers since the initiative began. So that's really good news. I think also, as the board knows, staff is doing outreach to representatives of the business community to build awareness and collect feedback about a possible building square footage parcel tax and how such a progressive tax could be implemented consistent with our authority's Enabling Act, which requires any tax the authority levies to be applied uniformly. Staff in the ad hoc committee continue to research and analyze with our municipal finance experts the appropriate parameters of a building square footage parcel tax and the feasibility of a range of rates per developed square foot, and to understand how that relates to the potential revenue generation to address the agency's forecasted needs over the next 15 years. Also, the board, I think, knows we have a draft expenditure plan that's on our website. It's also included in the packet this evening that's been developed and looks at 6 program areas for anticipated expenditures moving forward. And those areas are the protection of natural and working lands, restoring and maintaining and stewarding open space lands and natural resources, expanding public access, expanding investment in urban parks and open space, engaging and educating the community, and lastly, supporting agriculture and healthy soils. And we're getting a feedback in a variety of ways on that through our public communication channels, through our agency website, through these board meetings, and through our Citizens Advisory Committee meetings, and through public presentations, including one we did just this week to the Berryessa Community Advisory Council. Staff has been receiving some interesting feedback from the public, the CAC, and the board that it's really important that we talk about how we've spent our Measure Q and Measure T revenues since 2014 over the last decade. And so our staff has been hard at work analyzing those expenditures and preparing some public educational materials about how voter-approved revenues have been spent to date and how such future funding would be spent under a similar proposed measure. Kind of like a promises made, promises kept approach. So Megan's going to just walk us through how we've analyzed this and how we're kind of graphically representing it. So Megan?
Great, thank you, and good evening again, directors. This is a similar chart to what I showed. We had the update, I guess it was last month, but with some tweaks that I think are very positive, including our communications department got their hands on making this graph look a lot better than the way it looked before. So I think that alone is a big step forward. But what this is looking back at all Measure Q and Measure T expenditures all the way back to 2015 through this past fiscal year, through June 2024. And what we did was divide it into the categories that are essentially what Andrea was just describing, looking ahead at the draft expenditure plan. Because if we've looking how we spent it before is an indication of how it would go into the future. So I'll go through these quickly and happy to answer questions along the way. Starting at the top, that green color is protection of natural and working lands. This is land acquisition, things like that, buying land in Coyote Valley and elsewhere. The next highest category there, the yellow, 27%, is restoration and stewardship for community resilience. This is another big category that includes lots of things. It includes restoration, which are generally capital projects, things like we have some projects restoring Fisher Creek, Sparkles wetland enhancement projects, things like that. But this category also includes a lot of the day-to-day land management that we need to keep our lands healthy. So this is things like invasive plant management, integrated pest management, vegetation or fuels management. Again, that day-to-day stuff, going back to Director Kennett's questions earlier that, grant funds usually can't fund. And so that's a big category. Down at the bottom there, the orange is new trail facilities. This includes things like our recent Miami Yakima public access, those new trails. It also includes the Coyote Valley Open Space Preserve accessible trail that is underway now. The purple is the Urban Grant Program, which we've been talking about a bit tonight. We've so far awarded 74 grants through that program for projects all throughout our jurisdiction to connect people to nature. The blue color is environmental education. This is programming, events, and other kinds of public awareness efforts. The dark gray is program implementation support. And this is a little bit of a catch-all, but these are things that are really needed to get our work done. So things like our GIS program, doing some of the analysis that we need to then use in the field for other things. Managing the grant program. So Jackie McBride's time, my time, for example, if we're working on the grant program, doesn't go into the grant program itself. That's really for awards. So this is the support to make sure that that grant program can happen. And then lastly, the smallest category is administration and governance. And this includes a variety of things related to transparency and oversight. And that includes things like the expenses for the expenditure oversight committee, parcel tax engineering services, things like that. So we put this together, and again, our excellent comms team made this look much cleaner and better than it looked before. I'm very appreciative. And so this is looking backwards at what we've spent, again, Measure Q, Measure T spending during this decade. And the next slide is putting that in perspective. So on the left is that same chart showing Measure Q, Measure T spending and all the things we did with it. On the right, proportionally sized, Mark Landgraf did the math. But we have spent we've gotten more than 2.5 times that amount in outside funding. And that includes grants to us as well as partner contributions to projects, things like that. So we've really stretched those tax dollars a lot further than we would have if we had stayed within the tax base. And that made a huge difference in what we can do. But just going back again, reiterating, grants are wonderful. We'll continue to look for them. We've been very successful, but they are for capital projects almost exclusively. And so all of the things was a perfect segue earlier, the questions and Andrea's response, because we're looking for other options for some of that other kind of expense that we have.
Thanks, Megan. So staff was just finalizing a handout today with those really nice looking pie charts. Or maybe you call them donuts, right? That we can provide to the board as you're having conversations with your constituents or community organizations. And of course, we're happy to come out and talk to those people as well. In terms of next steps, last slide here, we plan to come back to your board on July 25th with a summary of the funding measure feasibility analysis to date, and discuss elements of a proposed funding measure with you and get recommendations on next steps. So like we said, some of those things, the feasibility analysis, we're still looking at the rate itself. What are we going to land on? We're narrowing that down now, but we want to start to talk with the board about that. And the ad hoc committee is very, very important to that discussion and ultimate recommendation. And that concludes our presentation on this item.
Do we have any public comment?
There now.
So this is not an action item, this is just information only at this point. Okay. Yes.
Could you go back to the previous slide?
One moment.
I'm just wondering where that lower picture was taken. I want to go there.
The best part of the presentations is all the photos.
I think that's Marshall Cottle Park, which is one of the projects we funded through our grant program. I'm very excited. Both our 20% grant program, and we have several grantees who are long-term lessons there.
Discovery Farm.
It's part of Marshall.
Got it. I know, but it's good call.
Okay. And are there any other questions? No. Okay. Yes, oh, Director Sutherland has a question. Okay.
It's not a question. I just like to make a statement. I think that one of the things, when you look at the different donuts, the fact that so many outside organizations trust us with their money is remarkable. I think that that says a lot for the organization, that other people are willing to give this organization their money. So thank you.
All right, we will now move on to committee meeting summaries. So this evening, it does seem like a long time ago, but it wasn't. The Admin and Budget Committee met and we discussed the revised application for the at-large CDC member. Very robust conversation, and I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that for the rest of the board?
Sure, we've been working on for a couple of meetings about revising the procedure for reviewing at-large applicants. And tonight we took a look at an updated proposed draft of the updated CAC application, which would apply for both at-large and district representatives. I got some great feedback. Gonna retool a little bit, and the next APC meeting will be in September. So we'll bring it back to the committee. Great.
And then we also reviewed an application which will be coming to the board in 2 weeks for a new CAC member.
Yes, the applicant for an upcoming at-large vacant seat, the applicant is Mary Patterson.
All right. That's it with the ABC. Informational reports, General Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One quick item, then I'll pass it on to my colleagues. I just want to thank those board members who were able to attend the recent dedication of the Bay Area Ridge Trail segment out at Rancho Cañada del Oro, celebrating Rancho Cañada del Oro and its connection to Calero. It was a wonderful partnership with the Bay Area Ridge Trail Council. 14 miles of Bay Area Ridge Trail were being dedicated. The largest segment of Ridge Trail in one time ever. So thank you, board members who were able to come. Director Kennedy, it was great to have you there, Director Dominguez. And it was also very nice. That was the very first appearance by Todd Lofgren, the new County Parks Director. He had some words to say, and it was a great celebration. And I also really appreciated the representation from Senator Cortese, and we had representation from County Board of Supervisors, Sylvia Arenas' office, Otto Lee, and excuse me?
Supervisor Young.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you, yeah. Supervisor Betty Young, yeah. Which said a lot about the partnership between Ridge Trail, County Parks, Open Space Authority, and other organizations. So it was a really, on the heels of the founders event, it was a very feel good opportunity there that day. Lee?
Good evening again, Directors. Lee Rauscher, Assistant General Manager. Just briefly thanking the board for considering and approving the budget tonight. As many of you acknowledged, a lot of hard work does go into preparing that. So I also want to thank the management and strategy team and Justina team for all of their hard work and very sharp pencils this year. Also wanted to remind you that at your next meeting on June 26th, we will be celebrating the long and distinguished board tenure of former Director Potter, and also honoring the memory of former Director Richard Forrest. We hope to see you in a couple weeks.
A couple of quick updates. One, it's just very happy with all the difficult news recently with funding. I'm very happy to announce one new grant that we were just awarded. It was $117,000 for the Rancho Cañada del Oro pond restoration. Rachel Clemens led this, did a great job. We're thrilled to get that grant. This is from Point Blue. So we'll be getting that underway soon. Going back to Director Sutherland's comments earlier, just wanted to remind the board, we only have 2 federal grants right now in terms of active grants. One is the Housing and Urban Development, $800,000. That's for the Coyote Valley Accessible Trail. And we've been assured, we believe that one is on track. Funding is secure. The other one, though, is the one that we're really watching closely, which was the cybersecurity grant. I think I mentioned last time that the Department of Homeland Security paused all such grant awards, and it's still under pause. And what we've just recently learned is they're reviewing them all, but in chronological order. And they started with the 2021 awards, and we are late 2024. So it's going to be a while before they probably get to ours for that review, but still hopeful that it will continue to go forward. And lastly, just a reminder, I said it earlier, but our urban grant program is out right now. Happy to help if there's any way we can support you to get the word out. Need materials or anything, just let us know.
Last update, I think maybe, but just want to call to your attention, you should have all received an email. We are searching for our next staff accountant. So that recruitment is currently live, accepting applications through June 23rd. And then Lee mentioned some of the honoring of board related folks at the June 26th meeting, but that will be a meeting of lots of celebrations of tenure. We will also at that meeting be honoring Dave Tharp, our retiring equipment mechanic operator, and Terry Roggaway, our retiring educational programs administrator. Both who have been with us for 18 years. I think they started actually within a month or two of each other and decided to go into retirement on the same day even. We hope you'll enjoy sharing lots of memories. I know that with their tenure, most all of you have some kind of interaction or story with them or attended a docent hike or whatever it may be. Look forward to that.
Okay. Legal counsel.
No report, Madam Chair.
I always do this because he's. All right, board member reports. Director Gill, Director Dominguez.
Want to just say that I appreciate participating in that event. I thought it was great, the Ridge Trail opening, and it was a great opportunity to meet all the partnerships and all the staff there as well. So just appreciate the opportunity and invitation to that, and also want to thank Caroline for the onboarding experience. It's been smooth, very welcoming, and I appreciate the hard work you put behind that.
My report is there was a special district meeting on June 2nd. Again, that we are rotating presentations. So Stephanie Moreno did the presentation. The next one is probably going to be Valley Water on water supply. That should be a fascinating one. So anybody's welcome to attend. And then LAFCO had a I think we broke a record for the fastest LAFCO meeting we had, where we adopted the work plan and the budget. And in case you weren't aware, it got put back onto LAFCO from the 4 years as an alternate. So, Director Sound, Director Matthews.
I was really sorry to miss the trail dedication, but I had a wedding in Placerville and I barely made it. We just got out of the car and walked right into the wedding venue. But congratulations on that. It sounds like it was great. Monday, various Citizen Advisory Council, which is, I think it's been around for 40 or 50 years. A very stalwart group that watches over our area and is a good group. Our illustrious general manager gave the most enthusiastic, exciting presentation on the Open Space Authority that all of us could ever hope for. So I thank you for that. It was really wonderful. And if we could get that spirit throughout our organization to every community group in the city, we won't have a problem passing a measure.
And Director Kennett.
As a member of the Economic Development Committee for Morgan Hill, I received a briefing this morning from the Western District representative of the National Chamber of Commerce, who unsuccessfully tried to put a positive spin on the management by confusion, if you will, from the White House as to what's coming. Usually they're pretty good at predicting the sense of what's coming. And she tried to put a spin on it and it didn't work. But part of my report this morning, I mentioned that BART was coming to South County. And nobody, only one person in the committee heard about our BART, Barrier Ridge Trail, and got a lot of questions. So we might be getting a request to do a presentation either at that or one of the breakfasts to explain how we're involved with be a good idea for us to how we're involved with the Barrier Ridge Trail and what it's all about.
All right, so that concludes board member reports. So now, announcement regarding the items to be discussed in closed session will be made prior to closed session.
There's one item on closed session, conference with general counsel, existing litigation, open space authority, body. Specific details are listed on the agenda.
Okay, with that, we will adjourn to closed session. McKenna.
You have a quorum.
You have a quorum,
Yeah.
okay, all right, the report from closed session,
No reportable actions, Madam Chair.
all right, with that, we're formally adjourned.